Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Like, share, and subscribe, and let's begin the story.
The basement was cold and damp, the air thick and stale. He stood there towering, his head nearly brushing the ceiling. His features were long and slender, limbs stretched unnaturally. His arms hung low, fingers almost grazing his knees. His legs, thin and bone-like, made him stand at an impossible 12 feet tall. His mouth stretched wide, too wide. An unnatural stretched mouth that revealed nothing but a black void inside. His eyes, deep and hollow, were pits of endless darkness, a void that seemed to pull everything in. I don't remember how it got there or how it even got inside. All I know is I locked it deep in my basement where it couldn't come out. Well, that was until I found the basement door wide open. "Hello," I said, staring into the dark basement that yawned open before me. My voice felt small, swallowed by the shadows below. Fear crawled up my throat, thick and sour like I might throw it up. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking. Then I heard it, soft, rattling noises from the kitchen. Gentle, deliberate, like something was moving in there. Something was in the house with me. I moved deliberately, each step slow and careful, my breath caught in my throat. I watched my surroundings, making no noise as I crept toward the kitchen. And then I saw it. The creature from my basement stood at the sink, its towering frame hunched awkwardly beneath the ceiling. It stared out the window, motionless, its long, slender limbs hanging at its sides. It didn't move, it didn't make a sound, it just stood there, like it belonged. My heart slammed against my ribs as I bolted for the front door, feet barely touching the ground. I didn't dare look back. I didn't need to. The roar came first, splitting the air like a thunderclap. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was deep, raw, and wrong, vibrating through my bones, rattling my teeth. My legs nearly gave out from the sound alone, but fear shoved me forward. I hit the door hard, bursting into the cold night air. My car was just ahead, parked in the driveway. My keys. I needed my keys. My hand dove into my pocket, fingers trembling as I fumbled them out. Behind me, the door exploded open with a splintering crack. Heavy, unnatural footsteps pounded against the ground, fast, too fast. I didn't have to see it to know it was coming. I could feel it closing the distance. I reached the car, yanked the door open, and threw myself inside. My hands shook so badly the keys slipped from my fingers and hit the floor mat. No, no, no. I grabbed them again, forcing the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed, the sound of death. The creature lunged from the doorway, its long, bony limbs propelling it forward in a blur of twisted movement. It was nearly to the car. The engine roared to life. I slammed the gear into reverse, tires squealing as I stomped the gas. The car jolted backward, throwing me against the seat as the creature lunged, just barely missing the hood. Its empty black eyes locked onto mine for a split second, burning into me before I peeled out of the driveway. I didn't stop. My foot stayed pressed to the floor, the car flying down the long, dark street. The night swallowed everything around me, but I didn't care where I was going, as long as it wasn't back there. Days passed. I barely slept, holed up in a cheap hotel on the edge of town. The room smelled like old cigarettes and stale air, but it didn't matter. It had 4 walls and a locked door. Every night I checked the window, just to be sure. That night was no different. I pulled back the curtain, heart already racing before I even looked. The parking lot below was empty, streetlights flickering weakly against the dark. For a second, I let myself believe I was safe. Then I saw it. Beyond the lot, past the stretch of cracked asphalt and the rusted chain-link fence, the woods began, thick, black trees rising like jagged teeth. And there, just at the edge where the trees met the night, it stood. The tall, twisted figure. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It only stared, watching me from the shadows. It found me. In an instant, I yanked the curtains shut, heart slamming against my ribs. My breath came in quick, shaky bursts. I sprinted to the door, peering through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway outside was empty, still and quiet. I didn't know how fast it was. I didn't know how smart it was. But it found me. Hours crawled by. The TV droned on in the background, some late-night sitcom I wasn't paying attention to. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see it again. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud, just a soft, deliberate tapping. My head snapped toward the door, dread sinking like a cold weight in my chest. Who the hell could that be? I slid off the bed, feet hitting the floor. Before I reached the door, I heard it. A voice. Hello. I need help. Help me. Help me. I need help. Help me. It didn't sound right. It was flat, robotic, like a bad recording played over and over. No emotion, no urgency. I froze, my throat tightened. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police, I shouted, voice trembling. The voice didn't stop. Help me. I need help. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door. It wasn't even yelling, just that same lifeless, droning tone. That was the worst part. The calmness, like it wasn't asking, like it was telling. My hands fumbled for my phone. I dialed 911, fingers shaking so hard I almost hit the wrong numbers. The voice stopped. My stomach twisted. It was like it knew. The operator answered. I explained everything. The voice, the knocking, the thing in the woods. My words tumbled out fast, frantic. We'll send someone, they said, but it might take a few hours. A few hours. My heart sank. My hand shook so badly the phone nearly slipped from my ear. I didn't hang up. I didn't move. I just stared at the door, waiting. Out of fear, I asked, Could you just stay on the line until they come? I don't want to be alone. At first, she hesitated. I'm sorry, sir. We can't do that. We have to answer other calls. Please, I cut in, my voice trembling. Please, I don't think I'll make it if I'm alone. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Then, quietly, she said, Okay, I'll stay. Relief washed over me, but it didn't chase the fear away. My eyes stayed locked on the door. Her voice was calm, gentle. My name's Rachel. What's your name? I swallowed hard. It's James. All right, James, I'm here with you. You're not alone. My throat tightened. Thank you. I think it's still out there. Can you still hear the voice? She asked softly. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. Number? It stopped when I called you, but the way it sounded. I paused, shuddering at the memory. It wasn't normal. It was like robotic, repeating itself over and over. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then said, You're doing great, James. Just stay with me. The officers are on their way. I nodded again, trying to steady my breathing. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that the quiet wasn't a good thing. It felt like the calm before something worse. Rachel's voice came through the phone again, steady but a little more serious. James, who's chasing you? Can you describe them? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat felt tight, like the words got stuck halfway up. I don't know, I said finally. It wasn't a lie, not really. It's tall, really tall. Its arms are too long, its mouth. My voice trailed off. My mind replayed that black void, the hollow eyes. My stomach twisted. Too long? Rachel asked gently. James, are you saying it's someone wearing a mask or... No, I cut in, my voice cracking. It's not a mask. It's not human. The line went quiet for a moment. I heard her breathe in. James, she said slowly, carefully. Are you sure? Could it be someone in a costume, maybe? Sometimes when we're scared, our minds... I know what I saw, I snapped, louder than I meant to. My voice echoed off the hotel walls, and I flinched, at how desperate I sounded. Rachel didn't react. She stayed calm. "Okay, I believe you. You're doing great, James. Just stay with me, all right? The officers are still on their way." My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a full breath. My eyes stayed locked on the door. I couldn't tell her the truth, not all of it. If I said a monster crawled out of my basement and followed me to a hotel, they'd think I lost my mind. Maybe I had. But the thing outside, the voice, it wasn't in my head. It was real, and it wasn't gone. An hour passed in what felt like seconds. The room was still, but I couldn't escape the feeling that something was wrong. My pulse thudded in my ears, every breath a battle against the rising panic. Rachel's voice kept me tethered to reality, her calm words a thread I clung to. Then, suddenly, a knock at the door. Knock, knock. I froze. The hairs on my neck stood up. "Hello, this is the police. Open the door. This is the police. Open the door." A wave of relief flooded through me. I wasn't alone. Finally, the officers were here. I rushed to the door, heart pounding in my chest. I glanced at my phone to make sure I hadn't missed anything, and there it was. The call still connected, Rachel's voice as steady as ever. "James, stay calm. They're on their way." I could hear the muffled voice of the officer outside, repeating the same line. The door was within reach. I grabbed the handle, yanked it open, ready to let in the safety of the police. But there it stood, the creature. It towered, its limbs unnaturally long, bent in sickening angles, its black, empty eyes locked onto mine. The grin that stretched across its face was wide and chilling, too wide. I looked down at my phone in my trembling hands. The screen read, 911. What's your emergency? A smile twisted across the creature's face. It wasn't the officer. It never was. I staggered back, my blood running cold. My stomach dropped into a pit of icy dread, and then it hit me. Rachel never asked for my location. I had never been on the phone with the police. I had been talking to it. God help me. "Around here, partner," said the grizzled and sunburnt face. "Daryl Choi?" I said, but it couldn't be. Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. The man tipped that face up at me, and I saw his familiar dark eyes clearly under his dusty cowboy hat. "You're dead," I blurted. The cowboy stood and drained his sarsaparilla. "This outsider bothering you, Smokes?" the bartender said, polishing a glass behind the gas station counter, which had been apparently repurposed as a saloon bar. There were still vape cartridges and 5-hour energy drinks on the shelf behind him, gathering dust next to bottles of unlabeled brown liquor and oil lamps. "I'm not an outsider," I argued. "This is my hometown. I took your niece London to prom, Mr. Jarocki." The bartender narrowed his eyes at me. "Name's Ben Wiley Sr. to you," he said, frowning under his huge white handlebar mustache. "Now, your money's as good as anyone else's, kid, but after you quench your thirst, you better take that steel horse you rode in on and ride along yonder if you know what's good for ye." "Yonder?" I said. "What the hell is going on? This is Massachusetts. Is this a bit?" The 5 other cowboys in the gas station, who were all sitting around makeshift tables that had been hammered together from pieces of the Holiday Station shelving, stopped their card game and glared at me. One of them reached for his sidearm. Daryl clapped his hand around my shoulder. "Settle down, boys," he said. "This here fella's kin, he just don't know it yet. Sit down, partner, and I'll tell my tale." "I just came in to pay for gas." "The thingy wasn't working outside," I said. "I'm actually late to my mom's memorial service right now." "Oh, don't worry about that, son. It's my mom's. Sit down." I sat down. The plastic chair squeaked. Mr. Jarocki brought me a stein of sarsaparilla. "Folks around here, you see. We ain't afraid of death no more," Daryl said. He lit his pipe. Red embers lit his dark eyes. "I met death. He's a 10-cent man." Daryl stared through the Holiday Station windows past the gas pump and toward the horizon of Peabridge, Massachusetts. In 2016, Darrell Choi had been crushed to death by a semi on his way home from UMass Amherst. He was the first friend I ever lost. His death had hit me hard. We weren't as close as I was with some of my other friends, but we'd cut class a couple of times to vape by the creek and trade Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I didn't think he could grow facial hair, but he had a lot of it now. You ever heard of Pet Sematary? Darrell asked. Yeah, I saw the movie, I said, and the remake. Well, turns out we got one of those. I stared incredulously. If I hadn't been at Darrell Choi's funeral, I wouldn't have believed him. Okay, I said. Basically, it works just like in old Steve King's account. You die, they put you in there, you come back wrong. First time they tried it with a person, it was Christina Elspeth, the old schoolmarm. Oh no, Mrs. Elspeth died? It don't matter now, Darrell grunted. Listen, they put the schoolmarm in the cemetery, and the next day she was crawling back all full of murderous rage and such, same as the dogs and cats and fish, but worse, spouting all kinds of vileness. So her husband shot her in the head. Mr. Elspeth? Not before she cut him real good across the belly, though. The old fella bled out right quick in his flower garden. So they buried both of them in the cemetery what's-it-again, on account of the headstone already being paid for. Mr. Elspeth was my youth pastor. He always snuck us leftover communion bread, and we'd eat it with marshmallow fluff. I didn't even know he had a gun. So another day passed, and, well, the two of them sprung back out of that dirt mound. Mr. Elspeth had come back wrong, just like his missus before him, all evil and such. But Mrs. Elspeth came back even wronger. Turns out there's a step down below evil. I'm talking downright, well, sort of like those red fellers we used to play at killin' as youngsters in that moving picture game. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, Darrell, I said. Can you drop the cowboy accent? Darrell glared at me. Folks call me Smokes these days, he said. Smokes Barlow. Wilbur Lee Barlow if you're a lawman. I'm not going to call you Wilbur Lee Barlow, I said. Nah, you'll call me Smokes like everyone else, he replied smoothly. Resident Evil, I said. Huh? The red zombies from Resident Evil. Is that what you were talking about earlier? Smokes shrugged. Anyhow, the two of them went on a killin' spree round here, and I guess word got out about the cursed boneyard. Everyone and their mother, I mean the ones who survived, hoped maybe their kin would be the exception to the rule. So more and more bodies went in the mound, and each of them came out as evil as the last, except for Mrs. Elspeth, who came back worse for wear. They put her back? Again? Well, see, the headstone had been paid for, so Mrs. Elspeth comes back and she's still spitting hell's worst curses and hankering for a stabbing. But now she's also sort of a mad scientist sort. So she breaks into the hospital and starts grafting people's limbs together. Hang on. What the hell do you mean she's a mad scientist sort? I said. She was a music teacher? Well, see, that's what I'm trying to tell you. She's running around, hair all crazy, in a stolen lab coat, ranting and raving about man playing God and splicing DNA and such, creating humanity's next evolution and such. So eventually, the hospital staff knock her out and toss her back in the hole. Next time she came back, she was a 19th century venture capitalist named Montgomery Prescott III, who aimed to turn Peabridge into a factory town. Sorry, when did this all happen? Of course, by this time her husband was on his third resurrection too, so Prescott was a force to be reckoned with the power of science behind him. The two of them did a bang-up job whipping this place into shape, corralling all the zombies and throwing them in the hole, for science, and to see if they could monetize it. Prescott Mining and Scientific Enterprise unburied all the dead from the regular old graveyard and tossed them in the hole, myself included. Then when they came back, they put all those evil folks to work in the mines or in the lab. Now those mines were dangerous, of course, with all the coal dust and gas leaks. Prescott didn't give a damn about safety. A lot of folks died, but they'd just bring them back. A couple weeks in, though, and there were about 20 Montgomery Prescott III's and about 100 mad scientists running around, and it turns out Monty Prescott works for no man. Each of them enlisted a squad of mad scientists and started their own enterprise. Wasn't too long before they started assassinating the competition. At this point, we'd all just gotten used to throwing people in the hole. Turns out after Prescott, you come back as kind of a Dracula. Now, I won't go into all that business. You know Salem's Lot? No? Is that a gang? What about that there Catholic picture show up there on the Netflix, the one on the island, put together by that Irish feller, Michael something, O'Flanagan. Mike Flanagan? Midnight Mass? Smokes smiled. There you go. It was all pretty much like that. I looked around at the gas station. Other than the restructuring that had transformed it from a regular holiday gas station into a cowboy saloon, it looked like this place had been through waves of disasters. There were bullet holes all over the ceiling, a massive rusty brown stain that someone had tried to scrub out with lye on the linoleum, burn marks on the walls with strange curling imprints of what looked like vines and needles. I'm guessing that everyone is vampires didn't last long, I said. It just ain't sustainable. Smokes shook his head. Vampires always think it's a smart idea to make everyone vampires, but see, it just don't work out. What do they eat? Turns out they don't. They starve. Then it's back in the hole. So things carried on like that for a while. At a certain point, we were just chucking people in there to see if there was an end point. You know, how far this thing goes. Turns out it goes evil, mindless zombie, mad scientist, Montgomery Prescott III, master vampire, ghoul, skeleton warrior, skeleton jazz musician, man-eating plant, plant-eating man, or a vegan, I guess you'd call him, and a real son of a bitch. Haunted ventriloquist, haunted dummy, haunted mummy, Christian family vlogger, Edna, evil cowboy, zombie cowboy, plant cowboy, Edna again, then just regular old pure cowboy. What comes after cowboy? I asked. Smokes shook his head. Nothing, he said. It's just cowboy all the way down after that. The cowboys playing poker glanced up at me through clouds of tobacco smoke. I recognized some of these people from around town, or rather, I recognized who they used to be. So, my mom's memorial, she's not really dead, is she? I said, a wave of hope and relief overwhelming me. I thought I'd have to say goodbye to her today, but she'll be back, won't she? Smokes only smiled sadly. You won't find fuel for your steel carriage, partner, said Smokes. I'll give you a ride to the cemetery. I followed Smokes out to the parking lot where several horses were hitched. Where did you guys get all these horses? I asked. Oh, where there's cowpokes, there's horses, he replied. That's a rule of nature. Smokes fed the horse an apple and stroked her mane before bidding me to climb on behind him. I held onto his waist, which was pretty weird for me because we were never close like that, and we galloped off up the highway toward the middle of town. We passed the elementary school, which had been covered in radiation warning signs and barbed wire. Then we passed the old Coney Island restaurant, which had been converted to a one-room schoolhouse. Main Street's restaurants, law firms, and tattoo parlor had been replaced by a dry goods store, an ox stable, a wagoner, an apothecary. The barber was the same, but it looked like he also pulled teeth now. The park that I played in as a kid had been bulldozed to hell, and in its place was a brown dirt yard with scattered mounds and holes all clustered near the center. A new sign hung over the entrance on a wooden board, Lazarus Mound Cemetery. I guess we could have been more creative, Smokes said, but it's too late for couldas, I reckon. A group of cowboys, clad in black, stood over a dirt pile. They held their hats to their chest as the eulogy was read. Smokes followed me to my mother's fresh grave. I dropped my bouquet of flowers on top of it. Family only, said one of the cowboys, glaring at me. Uncle Matt, it's me, I said. He twirled his goatee and grimaced, revealing a new gold tooth. It's Billy Cobra Nash these days, he said. Didn't recognize you, son. I suppose you want to say a few words? He gestured to the mound. Well, I would, I said, but I'm pretty sure she'll pop out halfway through. That's no way to talk about your poor dead mother, said Great-Grandma Tess, who I hadn't seen since 2004 when she died from stroke. Except she wasn't Great-Grandma Tess. She was a short old man with a long rabbity mustache and 2 guns on either side. Let the kid grieve, Slim, said Cobra. The sun set on us. The resurrected cowboy versions of my family members became hungry and bored and set up a small campfire where they heated up coffee and beans and spun some yarns. I asked questions about the cowboy economy and how it could sustain itself in this Massachusetts town that didn't have that many cows, and they responded by cussing me out and telling me to get lost. City boy. I said I couldn't be a city boy because I was from here, and they took away my beans. Finally, after about an hour, there was rustling from the mound. "Here she comes," said Cobra. The dirt shuffled and ran down the side of the mound, a miniature landslide. Finally, a gloved hand emerged. Then an arm, a dirty, dusty head crowned in a cowboy hat, burst from the pile, coughing. "Well, butter my biscuits, if it ain't the cheat, just in time for dinner," said Slim, hands on his hips. My mom, who was now a dirt-covered cowboy named the Cheat, clicked his boots together to dislodge some stones from his spurs. "Howdy. Miss me, fellas," the Cheat rasped, spitting pebbles into the fire. "Mom?" I said. The Cheat looked me over. "They call me Vernon the Cheat Maddox now," my mom said. "Why Maddox?" I asked. "Mom, what was wrong with Nguyen?" "Ain't a cowboy name," said Mom. "A cowboy can't be Vietnamese?" "Listen, kid," said the Cheat, clapping me on the arm. "I've had a long day, and to be frank, I can't abide a city slicker like you before I get my brew. Gotta fill up on beans and coffee or I'll be skinner than a jazz skeleton in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail." I watched my mom walk away toward the fire, greeting the other cowboys like old friends. "It's like she didn't even recognize me," I said, broken. Smokes patted me on the shoulder. "That ain't your mother no more, partner," he said. "Same as I ain't Daryl Choi." "What's the point of raising people from the dead if they're not themselves?" I said. "I reckon you've missed the essential theme of the pet cemetery premise," Smokes said. "The point is, it's a curse, not a blessing. To the living, at least. Mr. Stephen King said sometimes dead is better. And here in Peabridge, we reckon he was right." I heard a metal click. I turned around to see Smokes' shotgun pointed square at my forehead. "Whoa," I said. The cowboys at the fire turned to watch with dim interest, including my own mother. "Daryl, hey, put that away." "Dead is better, but you know what's best? Cowboy," he said. "Cowboy is the best there is." "Best there is," said the cowpokes around the fire in eerie unison. Wait. There was a bang. My vision filled with red, and then there was nothing. I saw and felt and heard nothing as Smokes watched my limp body fall backwards into the hole. He kicked dirt over me casually. He holstered his weapon. He sat down around the fire next to the others. "How many bullets you got, Smokes?" asked the Cheat through a mouthful of beans. "Not enough to get him all the way through," Smokes replied, lighting his pipe. "But enough to get him past Dracula, for sure." "That's the one you gotta watch out for," the Cheat said. "I'll stand vigil with you, partner." "You go home, Maddox. Wash that dust off. Tend to your herd. Be on the lookout for Edna, word is. She's still at large in places," Smokes said. "She'll come around," said Slim. "They always do." The campfire's embers rose up to the cloudy, dark sky. Smokes leaned back and tipped his hat low over his eyes. "This town's got room for plenty more cowboys," he said. Around the fire, a dozen pairs of black, gleaming eyes turned toward the Lazarus mound, waiting. The world exploded in a shower of glass and screaming metal. One moment, I was driving, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the torrential rain, blurring the already indistinct highway markers. The next, there was a deafening roar, a bone-jarring impact that stole the breath from my lungs, and then silence. An unnerving, absolute silence that should have been filled with the shriek of tearing metal, the shattering of glass, the pained cries of the injured. But there was nothing. Only a suffocating stillness, broken only by the rhythmic thump of my own pulse, a frantic drum against the sudden, unsettling quiet. My head throbbed, a dull ache that pulsed in time with the frantic beating of my heart. I tried to move, to assess the damage, but my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. Slowly, tentatively, I opened my eyes. The interior of the car was a mangled mess. Twisted metal clawed at the darkness. Shards of glass glittered like malevolent stars scattered across the crushed dashboard. Rain poured in through gaping holes in the roof, slicking the already sodden fabric of my seat. The air smelled metallic, acrid, like blood and burning rubber. Yet I felt nothing. No searing pain, no broken bones, not even a scratch. It was utterly surreal. I should be bleeding, screaming, possibly unconscious. Instead, I was remarkably intact, sitting amidst the wreckage of a catastrophic accident, experiencing only a dull throbbing in my head and a rising tide of disorientation. The silence was the most unsettling aspect. The absence of sound was more terrifying than any scream. It was a silence that pressed in, suffocating, amplifying the disquiet. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been ripped apart and then hastily stitched back together, leaving this grotesque, silent void in its wake. I pushed against the wreckage, forcing myself to sit up. My body ached, but the pain was negligible, a dull pressure that didn't match the severity of the crash. I looked around. The highway stretched before me, a dark, rain-slicked ribbon winding into the night. There were no lights, no other cars, just the relentless downpour and the crushing weight of the silence. I was utterly alone, isolated in the heart of this metal tomb, surrounded by the wreckage of what should have been a fatal accident. A terrifying, perfect solitude. Fear, cold and sharp, began to claw its way into my consciousness. This wasn't right. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Accidents like this resulted in casualties, injuries, chaos, and noise. Yet here I was, miraculously unharmed, adrift in a sea of silent destruction. The incongruity of it all was deeply unsettling. The dissonance between the catastrophic reality of the mangled car and my own unscathed body, a gaping chasm that threatened to swallow me whole. A feeling of unreality, of profound wrongness, settled over me like a shroud. The rain continued to fall, washing over the wreckage, blurring the already indistinct shapes around me. I tried to focus on the details, to ground myself in the reality of the situation, but the silence persisted, a constant, ominous presence that heightened the sense of unreality. It was like a suffocating blanket, muffling everything, even my own thoughts. The world felt strangely muted, as if I were watching a scene unfold from behind a thick sheet of glass. Or perhaps I was already behind that glass, separated from the world by a silent, impenetrable barrier. I eventually managed to clamber out of the crushed vehicle, the metal groaning in protest under my touch. The rain continued its relentless assault, plastering my clothes to my body, soaking me to the bone. The ground beneath my feet was a mixture of mud and broken glass. Each step I took sent a shiver down my spine, a visceral reminder of the horrific event that should have left me shattered. Yet here I was, eerily intact. As I stumbled away from the wreckage, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of a shattered car window. My face was pale, drawn, etched with the shock of the near-death experience. But there were no cuts, no bruises, no blood, not even a single scratch. My skin was flawlessly smooth, unblemished, a stark contrast to the brutal reality of the scene surrounding me. The realization slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. Something was deeply, horribly wrong. More than wrong. Impossible. This wasn't just an accident. It was something else. Something far more sinister. Something beyond comprehension. The implications hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, and my heart began to pound in my chest once more. This time not with the shock of the impact, but with a terrifying sense of impending doom. The silence remained, a constant, chilling companion, a stark testament to the unsettling and impossible nature of my survival. The rain continued to fall, a bleak and unforgiving curtain drawn over the unfolding horror. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean, sterile almost, a stark contrast to the chaos I had just escaped. The silence, however, remained, a heavy, oppressive blanket stifling any lingering hope of normalcy. I ran a hand over my cheek, expecting the rough scrape of gravel against my skin, the sting of a fresh wound. My fingers encountered only smooth, flawless skin. The memory of the searing pain, the impact, the feeling of being crushed, all impossibly vivid, were juxtaposed against the cold, unblemished reality of my own body. Where were the abrasions, the cuts, the bruises that should have been decorating my skin like grotesque tattoos? There were none. My skin was flawless, an unsettling testament to something beyond explanation. Panic, raw and visceral, threatened to overwhelm me. I examined my arms, my legs, every inch of my body, searching for some physical sign, some evidence to confirm the horrific reality of the accident. But my skin remained strangely pristine, untouched by the carnage I had just survived. It was as if the accident had happened to someone else, a spectral twin, leaving me untouched, an anomaly, a ghost in my own life. The thought twisted in my gut, icy and sharp, a constant reminder of the impossible truth. The rational part of my brain screamed for an explanation. Maybe it was shock. Maybe the rain had washed away any superficial injuries. Maybe I was hallucinating. But the mangled wreckage of the car, the persistent silence, the chilling absence of any physical trauma, all these facts contradicted the possibility of hallucination. This wasn't a dream. This was an impossible reality, a nightmarish paradox that defied all logic. And the silence. Oh, the silence. It was the most terrifying aspect, a constant, chilling presence that amplified every unsettling detail. The rising sun cast a pale, weak light on the scene, revealing the full extent of the devastation. The car was a twisted, mangled mess, a monument to destruction. Yet I stood beside it, unscathed, a living paradox in a world that didn't seem to acknowledge my existence. It was like a cruel joke, a dark comedy played out in the silent aftermath of a catastrophic event. The impossible silence gnawed at my sanity, a constant reminder of my improbable survival. I stumbled towards the nearest road, hoping to find help, to have someone confirm the reality of my situation, or perhaps to help me understand its absurdity. The road was deserted, the emptiness mirrored by the desolate landscape. The world was mute, watching me with a silent, unnerving gaze. Hours have passed, and there was still nothing, or so I thought. As I walked towards town, I could have sworn that I was seeing someone following me, someone that was just always out of my eyes, even outside of my peripherals. "Show yourself!" I began yelling out, but it seems that maybe I jumped the gun. I continued on my long journey back home, still without passing a single soul. I finally made it back home, but things seemed wrong. I saw my wife, and she was crying. She was sitting down on the couch wiping tears as she was on the phone, and without a moment of hesitation she took off in a hurry. I could not figure out why, though, but there was no use following her on foot, so I just waited. I waited, and waited for hours, watching television and browsing the web until the door opened and my wife came in. But someone was behind her, wrapped up with bandages. I was staring until I finally realized who it was behind my wife. I was looking at me. I don't even know how this is possible, but seeing my own face made me feel lightheaded. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grip the wall before my legs gave out. My vision blurred as I steadied myself, but my eyes stayed locked on the scene unfolding before me. My wife guided me, or whatever it was, into our bedroom, gently laying him down. She stayed by his side for a while, smoothing the sheets, brushing the hair from my forehead, whispering things only meant for me. Then she left. That's when he turned his head. For the first time since the accident, he looked directly at me. My breath hitched as I saw my own reflection in his darkening eyes. No, not darkening, blackening, as if ink was bleeding through them, swallowing the whites whole. "That sure was a close one," I heard my own voice say, though it didn't feel like mine. "This body was almost useless, but I'm glad it survived. Get comfortable, because unless you get as lucky as I did, you're going to be stuck like that for a while." What did he mean by that? What was even happening? My head pounded with questions, but I forced the words out. What happened? I wanted answers, but all I got in return was a laugh. My laugh twisted into something cold and cruel. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. That wasn't an answer. Not really, but something told me I wasn't going to get a better one. My frustration boiled over, my hands clenching into fists, my mind screaming at the impossibility of it all. I slammed my fist into the wall. The drywall cracked. I froze. I could affect my surroundings. Maybe I wasn't some Casper doomed to haunt my own home. Maybe, just maybe, I still had a chance. I followed him for weeks. I watched as he ate my food, used my computer, spent time with my wife. I watched as he walked into my job, smiled at my coworkers, laughed at their jokes. He slipped into my life with sickening ease, and no one, not a single person, questioned it. But something else was happening. At first, it was just flickers at the edge of my vision, little blurs that vanished when I tried to focus on them. Then they became more defined. Shapes, figures, moving in the dark corners of rooms, just out of reach. I thought they were stalking me, but they weren't. They were stalking him, or rather, my body. They wanted what I wanted, what he wanted. They wanted inside my skin. They didn't seem aggressive yet. They reminded me of scavengers circling a dying animal, waiting for their moment to strike. But then I looked at my hands, the fingers, the arms. They weren't solid anymore. They were darkening, losing their form, the same inky black that filled his eyes creeping through me. I was turning into them. I didn't know how long I had, but I knew this. I was running out of time. If I didn't act now, I'd be lost forever. Just another shadow lurking at the edges, waiting for scraps. I would take my body back. The plan was simple. I knew my schedule. I knew his schedule. I also knew that while the normal world couldn't touch me, I could still affect it. The only exception was the thing wearing my body. And I knew one more thing. For something to take over a body, the occupant had to leave first. For me, that had been the accident. That meant there was only one way to force him out. I had to nearly take my own life. If I failed, I'd become one of them. But even if there was only a 1% chance that I could reclaim what was mine, I had to try. I slipped into the car, silent, unseen, and sat in the passenger seat. He drove onto the highway, the speedometer climbing. The city lights blurred past as I steadied my thoughts. I couldn't screw this up. I wouldn't screw this up. The bridge was coming up fast. I reached out. With everything I had, I grabbed the wheel and wrenched it sideways. Tires screeched, horns blared, impact. Metal crunched, glass shattered, and the world erupted into chaos. The car slammed into the ground below in a sickening cacophony of destruction. The smell of burning rubber and gasoline filled the air. My body, his body, slumped over in the driver's seat, blood dripping from nearly every opening on his face. His ink-filled eyes fluttered open, then slowly slid shut. And then everything went black. I am writing this because I don't think anyone else has ever gone through this. No one else has returned to tell the tale. I didn't make it. I failed. As I type, the ink creeps higher, swallowing me inch by inch. Soon, I will lose all sense of self. I will become one of the others. A shadow, a scavenger, a nothing. If anyone reads this, please, don't forget me. Until very recently, I was a project manager for the Department of External Intelligence, a government organization tasked with probing the boundaries of human consciousness and unraveling mysteries beyond the paranormal. The things I have witnessed far exceed our expectations of the universe and shouldn't remain hidden, even if the truth is horrific. If you are reading this, I am so sorry for what is to come. When I was younger, my parents pushed me hard for good grades. Giving me the life they never had seemed to be their only duty, even if it meant that my childhood suffered. And I gave them what they wanted: the best marks in school, the hope of a successful career, and lots of money. Unfortunately, nobody, not even my cruel father, could have predicted that I would end up working for a secret branch of the government, one whose sole duty is uncovering facts that the mortal mind can barely comprehend. I started as a data analyst, but the executives soon realized that my skills could be better used elsewhere. It took just a few tests for me to be introduced to the psychical experiment sector, aimed at identifying uses for psychic phenomena. I was deemed to have special abilities and was told I could tap into a realm that few humans could. For a while, I was an agent for remote viewing. Essentially, my mind was used to spy on foreign nations. With some meditative steps, I was able to visualize complex environments and assist our army in pinpointing the locations of enemy bases. Was this ethical? I don't know, but it provided me with a sense of accomplishment, so I continued to do it. The more important I became in my job, the more I had to hide from my family and friends. My parents died thinking I was a pencil pusher for the government, and the few relationships I've had have remained short due to my secret life. The longer I've stayed with the department, the more information I have been given. But it was only once I became appointed as a project manager that I learned details that, if leaked, would change the world forever. I'm sure you have noticed the increased sightings of UFOs, or UAPs, in recent years. Their frequency has been at the center of my new position in the department. You see, these aren't vehicles piloted by little green men, they are beings themselves. Classified internally as seraphs, these entities have been visiting us for centuries. The Bible called them angels. The Quran named them malaika. But they are the same things that have been seen in the sky of every continent on Earth. I was told that they didn't know where they came from, or why they had visited us. Sadly, for them, I have a unique intuition, and knew that was a lie. I had spent many hours in the office after hours, dissecting classified documents and logging into computers above my access level. The more vivid the details became, the more I questioned my actions. What if I uncovered something I didn't want to? You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, a silly metaphor for a twisted reality I was soon to live. It took me many months, but I eventually pieced together why the 33rd floor of our building is off limits. The Department of External Intelligence has been communicating with the Seraphs and has a machine built for this sole purpose. Last week, I used the device. It was a day like any other, at least that was the role I played. I scanned my card to enter the building and made my way to my office on the 24th floor. I put on a happy face as I greeted my companions in the rustic elevator, patiently waiting for the neon green screen to tick higher while soft synth sounds filled the cramped space. Finally reaching my secretary, I cleared my schedule and began to set the plan into motion. I couldn't take the elevator to my destination. The buttons skipped straight from 32 to 34. However, I did learn that a maintenance ladder runs up the building's spine. Applying some remote viewing techniques, I discovered an access hatch on floor 28 behind some servers. This was all I could gain as the department recently installed consciousness dampeners, blurring my external vision. Getting to the server room was easy, and it took but a small distraction to enter the hatch as I began climbing the maintenance ladder. I was on the 28th floor, but looking down it seemed as though the shaft stretched into an infinite abyss with no end in sight. The department was unlike any other building, with winding corridors and frequent cases of spectral appearances. A ladder stretching to an impossible darkness seemed on brand. Entering the 33rd floor took some time, but with some minor effort, I was in the sector that only executives had access to. Standing in what appeared to be a reception area, the silence of my new environment startled me. I expected a welcoming party, but was met with nobody at all. The department's building was informally named the Monolith, due to its brutalist design and tall concrete walls. The 33rd floor was no different, with a ceiling that stretched higher than one would have expected the facility to accommodate. The area I was in was adorned in a familiar old-school look featuring Persian carpets, homely lamps, and box computers. We were told that vintage technology offered better protection against hackers. I stood facing a door labeled Testing and Research. It seemed like the sign I needed, so I swiftly made my way through. Presented with a long corridor, I knew that my goal stood at the end. Walking past the many doors to my left and right, I saw what appeared to be ancient symbols. The sounds I heard from each of them were almost indescribable. Some seemed like soft moans, while others appeared to be painful screams. I have no idea what was being done in these rooms. The double wooden doors at the end of the corridor clashed with the concrete surrounding it, but I suppose this was another example of the department's unique style. Before I swung the doors open, I noticed the digital camera in the corner. I had surely been caught, so there was no time to waste. To say I was shocked by what I saw would be an understatement. I had expected a massive machine with tubes and towering screens. Instead, the room contained only a leather couch facing a bulky CRT TV perched on a wooden stand. There was nothing else. No furniture, no monitoring equipment, just an outdated entertainment setup in a cold concrete space. I edged closer and saw a remote resting on the couch. Surprisingly, there were no numbers, and the only button was a round red one for power. I had come this far, so I did the only thing that made sense. I sat on the couch, pressing the button. Bursting alive, the ocean of static flooded my mind, and it became clear that this was the machine I was after. It's hard to describe, but I felt as though I entered a state where time had no meaning. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. A seraph was there with me. I could sense them. It didn't speak words, yet I understood what was being communicated. Closer to a feeling, information appeared in my mind as though I manifested it, but I knew it was foreign. It was as though the seraph spent a few moments within my skin. At first, I asked my pre-planned questions. I wanted to know where it came from and why it was visiting Earth. I quickly learned that languages developed by humans are a prime illustration of our insignificance in the universe. This is the best way I can put it. If you think about a house, with every room being a planet, we can move from one room to another, a crude metaphor for space travel. If we are sitting in the living room, the seraphs have always been here, in a place that occupies the same space but in reverse, mirrored dimensions, two areas next to each other, but because they are back to back, one doesn't notice the other. The seraph told me that the reason that so many of them have decided to visit us is that they are partaking in a great harvest. They have made their way through many universes, and now it was our turn. Human souls hold special meaning in their existence, and it is only through our death that they can be harvested. Through it all, I had no fear. The seraph comforted me and guided me along each stage of the conversation. It whispered wise truths and made me feel as though my normal life had been but a dream compared to true reality. With my mind barely comprehending the secrets I had learnt, the TV zapped off, leaving a brief imprint of static as it slowly turned pitch black. I had been told too much, perhaps more than I wanted, and so I ran to the door. By the time I had reached the floor's hatch, 2 department officials were already there to arrest me. Their voices appeared calm, yet their grip on the concussion devices remained firm. They had a clear intent to take me down with whatever force was necessary. What happened next, I don't remember. It seems as though a few minutes were wiped from my memory. I recall putting my hands behind my head in surrender. When I came to, my hands gripped the jagged edge of a broken lamp, with corpses slumped at my feet. 2 dead bodies lay before me, mangled into a portrait of ripped flesh. I had to escape. I would surely be locked up for something I don't remember doing. Diving into the maintenance hatch, I flew down the ladder as quickly as I could, racing out of the building while trying to hide the blood on my clothes. I believe some people saw the stains, but they could have just as easily been staring at a madman running through a government facility. I am writing this message on a library computer. I dare not go home, as I will surely be found there. On the run for 7 days now, I don't know what is going to happen, but the world deserves to know the truth. Great pain and mass deaths are coming. I know this because the seraph has continued to talk to me, giving me instructions for the coming months. I refused to die, and so I made a deal. I will help them. I will be a harvester in human form. In return, they will ensure that my soul remains eternal. My whole life I have been controlled by my father, by the department. But this pact was mine to make. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful. If you are reading this, I am so sorry for what is to come. Hold your loved ones tight and enjoy the time you have left. We will find you. You cannot hide forever. The Valley. Hi 3 Reddit followers. I am sorry for being gone for so long. You know how life can be. Devastating. I am writing this and posting it because I need answers, and I think it's a way for me to cope. Or at least, that's what my therapist said. Bear with me, I am not much of a storyteller. So, about a month ago, me, my best friend and boyfriend went about an hour southwest of where we live to visit our friend. For the sake of privacy, I will call them Colby, Vincent, and Ashley. Ashley and I grew up together. She is kind, easygoing, and a crazy-ass sense of humor. Colby is my boyfriend of almost 2 years. He is patient, protective, and honestly the best person I know. And Vincent is spunky. He walks around wearing cowboy boots. He is loyal, personable, and adventurous. Vincent and Colby are best friends. So we've all become really close. We play Xbox together, camp, get drunk, etc. Part of the way we bonded so fast and got so close was because we all share a love of the paranormal. Shocking, I know. One weekend, like many others, Colby, Ashley, and I pack up in Colby's car to make the drive down to see Vincent and do our usual activities, getting drunk and ghost hunting. The town Vincent lives in is weird. I don't know how to explain it. It's just weird. Stuck in a different time. Almost everyone there is old, or been there since they were born and will never leave. It was an old mining town, and the people there share stories of their hard times working the mines and how business boomed and crashed within years of each other. But what almost everyone shares stories of is the Valley. A canyon just off the 2-lane road referred to by locals as the freeway is what the people in town call the Valley, a dead-end canyon stretching no more than 15 miles. This is where all the mines were and still are. Now the town is dry and cold, the kind of cold that cuts through your skin and into your bone. The wind never stops. Summer, winter, spring, or fall, it's always windy. Especially in the valley, the wind whips off the rock walls and roars through the dead trees. Some nights in town, the wind coming out of the valley sounds like screams. The drive to see Vincent was as boring and ugly as usual. I sleep most the ride while Colby and Ashley bullshit about politics, religion, etc. I drift off to the start of another discussion I don't care enough to be a part of. Just as quickly as I'm asleep, I wake up to the sound of the wind hitting our car so hard I fear we might fly off the road. That's how I know we've made it. We meet Vincent at his house and make up a plan for the night, the spot we want to get dinner at and where we want to ghost hunt. It's a weekend, but in town it's dead. The hum of the neon sign outside the restaurant we come to every time we're in town is the only thing breaking the silence except the damn wind. As we sit down and order our usual dinner, Vincent tells us that he has somewhere he wants to show us. It's just up the valley. It's called the Devil's Playhouse. Just as those words escape his lips, the waitress on her way over with our pitcher drops and shatters the whole thing. She sheepishly apologizes, sweeps it up, but stops halfway. Did I hear you say the Devil's Playhouse? Sorry, it's just, I am new into town and have heard the rumors of that place, did you know? Vincent shoots her a look that's quick to shut her up, and she leaves. I asked him what the stories were about this place. He leans in close to us and whispers, well, as you guys know, the valley, well, actually, the whole town was built for the mines. So when the miners settled here, some weird people came with them. He glances around to make sure nobody is listening and lowers his voice even more. Well, the people would take, like, horses, cows, even the miners' fucking pets, and take them up to their spot and slit their throats and fucked up shit like that. They said they did it for the devil. He clears his throat and leaned back. But that's just an old rumor, who knows what happened, but either way, the place is freaky. Ashley looks around at us in a deep voice and says, that's what I'm going to do to you guys if you don't Venmo me for dinner. I laugh and roll my eyes. We finish dinner, pack up in the car. Fuck, Colby says, feeling around in his pockets. I lost my zins. Can we stop at a gas station, please? Vincent pulls off into a gas station that consists of one pump and a small shop. We go inside and I'm browsing around when I see Ashley bump into a tall, lanky, awkward-looking man, knocking the items in his hand to the floor. Oh, I'm so sorry, she says. The man turns around with a big smile on his face and says, "No worries, ma'am," and picks up his car keys and a pack of cigarettes up off the floor. I watch as he walks out to the parking lot, gets in his nice brand new truck and drives away. Ashley has moved on to the next aisle when I realize I'm staring. Vincent walks up next to me. "You ready?" I asked him who that man was, and he says, "Lance Cornell. Dude's nice as hell. He lives at the mouth of the valley. Funny enough, he owns the beer. You know the place we had dinner at tonight?" I smile, and we all walk out the gas station and load back up into the car. In the car, Colby's puts a hand on my thigh and rubs his finger against my jeans. Ashley whips her head around from the front and says, "You know what I think I've heard of this place? Yeah, like some kids went missing hiking up here and were never seen from again." She narrows her eyes and looks right at me with a mincing glance. "Hey, stop that. She's lying to you. Nobody's gone missing." Vincent gives me a smile in the rearview mirror. The sun is just starting to go down when we get there. We're swapping scary stories the drive up, but as soon as we cross the threshold, the stories stop and a sense of dread fills the space the stories held. Vincent drives up to a gate with a giant no trespassing sign on it. "Well, this is it. Now we just hike up a bit. Watch for cars too. This is like super illegal." Me and Ashley share a glance, and she smiles with her reassuring, kind smile, and we start walking. Halfway up, Colby takes my hand and winks at me. He says, "How you feeling? Scared?" "Don't be. I won't let anything happen to you. Plus, all this stuff is total bullshit, babe." He smiles and jogs up a little to catch up with the others. I stay behind. I am winded, cold, and uneasy. I hear a snap of a twig behind me and whip around. Holy fuck, what was that? My friends turn around and watch as a bunny crosses the trail behind me. "False alarm, sorry guys." Vincent rolls his eyes and laughs. After a short 20-minute walk, the sun has completely set in the valley, and we turn on our flashlights to see the beast of a building standing in front of us. An abandoned mining building. Must have been storage or something, because the ones we drove past on the way in don't even hold a candle to this. The wind going through the windows makes it look like the building itself is shriving in the cold air of the wind. "Wow," Ashley says with a grin. "Well, come on in, mi casa es su casa," says Vincent as he stands in the doorway. All the windows and doors are gone. There is a hole in the floor that looks like it leads somewhere, but however people were getting down there has been gone for quite some time. "Dude, imagine there is just someone living down there," Ashley says, and nudges me with a smile. What the fuck? What an odd thing to say. Ashley and Colby are taking pictures on her digital camera she carries with her everywhere. The odd thing is the place has no graffiti. It's actually clean. "No glass or anything," I say out loud. "Yeah. Well, nobody ever comes up here because, well, the cops are bored in a town like this," Vincent said like he was reading my mind. "All right, fuckers, I say we split up," Colby says. "All right, gang, let's look for clues," Ashley copies in a teasing voice. My heart starts to race. The building is only one floor if you exclude the hole in the ground. Just stay on the main floor and keep your light on just in case. Vincent tells us we all nod and walk our separate ways. I begin to walk around the corner of the general area we're in. I am looking around, still amazed at the cleanliness of this place. No dust, no leaves, nothing. It's wild. I turn around to see Colby right there. "Ah!" he screams. I shove him away and smack his chest. "Idiot." He leans in and tries to kiss me, and as I lean into him, I hear aloud, "What the hell?" Ashley sounds scared. We run over to find her looking at the ground with fear in her eyes. We pan our flashlights down to what she's looking at. A dead fucking rabbit. Fresh, bright red blood pouring out of the hole in its body where its head used to be. I look away and throw up in my mouth. "Dude, what the fuck?" Colby says. "What the fuck is right?" Ashley says, sounding scared. "Let's leave, I want to leave. Please, this is fucked up. This shit is like real, like, what the fuck? We need to leave. It's the bunny from the trail." "What are we waiting for?" Ashley screams at us. I swallow my throw up and start walking to the door. The boys are standing there staring at it. As I walk away, I start to lose sight of them. It's so dark that I don't know how people would navigate without a source of light, and it's so quiet, almost peaceful. Wait a fucking minute, it's so quiet. What happened to the wind? My heart drops to my stomach, and a pit joins it. It's like we all notice it at the same time. The silence. Deafening. No rubbing of tree branches, no bugs, no hum of electricity, no sound of shoes on the floor, and most definitely no wind. "Wow," Colby says. "Can we go now?" asks Ashley. I pan my flashlight around to each of their faces. My heart is beating so loud, it's filling the silence. "Chill," Vincent says. "Don't freak yourself out, okay? It's probably nothing. Let's go. Okay, you're right, this was a mistake." He takes a step back, and as he does, I see a figure in the back hidden in the darkness take a step behind him. The figure smacks Vincent's phone out of his hands and onto the floor, silencing my heartbeat from my ears. "Holy fuck! Wait, what? Vincent!" Ashley screams. We all panic, getting closer to each other. Just then, the sound of footsteps on the floor running, no sprinting towards us. Colby yanks me out of the way, but he's not fast enough to grab Ashley, the figure running, picks her up in a single swoop, and I hear her cry out as his voice gets more and more distant. "Ash," I start to say, as Colby covers my mouth with his hand. We back up into the darkness, moving as quickly and quietly as we can. Suddenly, the floor underneath my feet is gone, and we fall right into the hole in the floor. Slamming my head against the cold, damp cement floor, I knock myself unconscious. I wake up to the sound of sobs and screams. It's not dark anymore. The main room of the building is lit by candles burning and surrounding me, us in a circle. We're all tied up, bound by our hands and feet, sitting next to each other. 3 hooded figures stand far enough away. The candlelight isn't showing their face. "What do you fucks want with us?" Colby yells. "You please let us go," begs Ashley. One of the men steps forward and into the candlelight. A bald man who looks to be 60 is carrying the head of the rabbit, the blood still dripping on the floor. He holds the head above each of us while muttering under his breath. The blood is dropping onto my face. Warm, wet, sticky, the metallic smell filling my nose. I gag and cry and shake and all the things. After they put the blood on Colby mine and Ashley's heads and faces, they stop at Vincent. One of the hooded figures step forward. A short, fat, hairy man in his 40s reaches out a hand towards Vincent. He mumbles something under his breath. Vincent, crying, looks at us and back at him and takes his hand. Tears streaming down his face, he says, "I can't do this. Please don't make me do this, please." "They're my friends, you assholes." The last robed man steps forward and the strong stench of cigarettes follows him. It's the man from the gas. He grabs Vincent's shoulder and says, "Vincent, we talked about this. Think of your mother, your sister. Do it for them. I promised you something, and I would never break a promise." Vincent wipes away the tears and backs up into the darkness. "Vincent!" Colby screams. "What are you doing to him? What are you doing to us?" Tears are gushing out of my eyes as I see the fear on Colby's face. Before Colby can say another word, his throat is slit and blood is spewing out all over his clothes. He looks at me. His eyes widen with fear and his body slumps over. "To appease," they all say in unison. Just then, Vincent returns with container of lighter fluid. He drops it to the floor as he falls to his knees. A blood-curdling scream escapes his lips. "No! I told you not him. You told me you wouldn't hurt him. Please don't." He is shaking and crying and holding Colby's limp body, his blood soaking onto Vincent's clothes. Cornell says something under his breath, and the other 2 drag Vincent away while he is kicking and screaming. Suddenly, the screaming stops. I am shaking. My heart is shattered. I'm so shocked I almost forget Ashley is next to me until I hear a whimper and see her bloody and shivering, a piss stain showing on her pants. The 2 men return, one of them picking up the gasoline while the other picks up matches. They begin to make a ring around us, and just as they're about to light it, Cornell mumbles something to the other 2, and they pick me up and untie me. I try to run over to Ashley, but they yank me back. "No, wait, I want to see her, please. What are you doing to my friends? Please, no." I can barely see through my tears. "Run," the bald man says. "Leave this town and don't ever come back." Before I can dispute, the circle around Ashley is ablaze, and she is screaming, screeching, crying. I can't take it anymore, so I run. I leap out the window, fall to my knees, but I don't stop. I get up, the wind is back. It's whipping the tears flowing down my face. My feet give under me, and I fall down the mountainside. I slam my head on the ground, my hands and bloody and scraped. I don't stop. I get up. I am just at the car when I stop. I turn back around and look up. I can hear loud chanting, rhythmic, and a scream like I've never heard. Something deep, something guttural, primal. A howl of sorts, and then light. A bright flash of light, and then it's all gone. And suddenly I can smell cigarettes. I get into Vincent's car. The thing is old. It barely stars, but it does, thank God. I sit there for a second, looking up at the building, and then I scream. I slam my hands on the horn. I cry, and I cry, and I cry. I slam on the gas and don't stop until I'm out of the valley, out of the town, until I'm back in my town. I show up at my local police station covered in blood. I tell them everything, and they write it down and speed away. Sirens on, backup arriving, the whole 9 yards. They don't find anything but a circle of dust and ash on the ground. The police told the parents what happened, and I've been questioned multiple times, although my story never changed. They've held 3 funerals, but I didn't attend Vincent's. I couldn't and will never enter that town again. I didn't attend anyone's. So now I'm here, alone, haunted by the memories of that terrible night, in a fuck ton of therapy, on the news, in pain and suffering. I just don't understand why they didn't kill me. I wish they would have ended it all and killed me. Please kill me. Nobody believes me, but I know what happened. It all happened in that fucking valley. I sit here looking at the blue painted walls with the same vintage movie posters I've had since I was 13. This room has been my comfort zone since I can remember. Living in the basement, I have always had a sense of independence, even at early ages. I could customize it to my design. I never let my parents' views bleed in here. I am a religious person, but I don't need a cross on every wall, proverbs on every mantle, and paintings of Christ everywhere in between. Down here I had freedom, but now it seems like this will be my tomb. I write this not only to get out the raving anxieties eating at my insides like a starved tiger, but to perhaps rationalize what is the completely irrational. My parents are the typical conservative Christian type, real Republican poster children. Growing up, my Sundays were completely haunted by 3-hour-long morning sermons from a pastor with eyes that wandered to a disturbingly downward. You would think my mom's eyes were on her chest if you even saw one conversation between the two. The rest of my early childhood ends up being a blur of Sunday studies and so many prayers that when I even see a plate of food being set on a table, not that I have for a long time, my hands reflexively go into a prayer without me even realizing it. Once I got a little older, around 16, I started to get sick of it. My friends would always post pictures of them at the beach on Sunday in bikinis that my mom would call an exorcist for if she ever saw me in. Through months of rolling eyes and dirty looks during Sunday service, my mom finally confronted me. "Are you questioning your faith?" she asked, coming into my room unannounced one night a few months back. "No, Mom, I still believe in him. I just don't know why I can't have faith and do things my friends do at the same time." I responded, still hiding my true feelings. "Honey, on the day of judgment we all must come to terms with our transgressions and make repent of our earthly sins. It is a fallen world after all. Ever since the serpent tricked Eve in the garden, we have had to learn to coexist with our natural-born sin by," she began. I knew another sermon was coming. I needed an out. "You're right, Mom," I said, putting my hand on hers where she sat at the end of my bed. "I was just falling into temptation. I won't let it happen again, trust me," I said with my best fake smile I could muster. "I trust you, sweetheart. You know I was once young too, believe it or not," she said with a smile and a giggle before getting up to kiss me on the forehead and saying goodnight. For the next few weeks, I just tried to keep a low profile, do my best to put on a happy face around the creepy pastor, but I slowly felt my faith slipping away. Service after service, I became more and more detached and began to seriously question who exactly my parents consider as their faith. Do they really believe in God, or is it just a helpful excuse to control my life further? Last week I had enough. On Sunday night, my friends texted me that they were going to a friend's house to smoke weed and hang out. Sundays are lockdown days. I am absolutely not allowed to see any of my friends all day, as it's reserved entirely for family and prayer. However, living in the basement grants some privileges, chief among which is my window. The screen door covers the window but can easily be popped out of place. So around 11 p.m., after my parents were fast asleep, I snuck out and bolted to my friend's car, waiting for me in the alley behind our house. "Hey, choir girl," Ashley said as I jumped in the back seat like I was fleeing the scene of bank robbery. "Drive, get me the fuck out of here," I said, tapping her shoulder relentlessly. Once we pulled up to Ashley's friend Megan's house, she stopped, put the car in park, and grabbed a baggie with a joint out of her backpack. "If I'm going to be in the room with Josh now that he and Megan are dating, I'm going to need this," she said, fiddling with her lighter, trying to get a spark before taking a puff and handing me the freshly lit joint. I have never smoked before, never even in the same room as someone who smoked cigarettes before. My immediate reaction was to say, "No, thank you," I said, waving my hand in the air. Ashley shrugged her shoulders. "Suit yourself," she said, taking another hit. We sat talking for a minute while she finished the joint. "Your parents still running a dictatorship?" Ashley asked after a brief moment of silence in the conversation. "Yeah, the older I get, the more they are convinced that whenever I'm out with friends, I'm worshiping the devil or having orgies with every guy in town," I responded, rolling my eyes. "I mean, not on Sundays, at least," Ashley said before immediately bursting out laughing at her own joke. I laughed with her, and once we both caught our breath, I stared at what little weed was left in her joint. "You know what? I'm dead if I get caught regardless," I said, holding my hand out to accept the joint. "Look at my choir girl go," Ashley responded. "You can finish it, my treat." I took one puff and immediately thought I swallowed an ember. My throat burned like a building on fire, and I coughed until my eyes watered and I was gasping for air like a drowning man. Ashley laughed and said, "It's okay, you won't have virgin lungs forever." After coughing my way through the rest of the joint, we went inside. What little I remember mostly consisted of me being slumped on the couch like a weighted blanket was draped over me, even though all I had was my hoodie and leggings on. When Ashley dropped me off a block from my house, I got out and tried to smell every part of me to make sure the weed smell had stayed in the car. As I turned the corner and saw the living room light on in my house, I felt the ground fall from beneath me. My heart raced so fast I thought it would never stop. I spent the next 10 minutes walking back and forth trying to think of what to do, until I decided that if I try to sneak back in through the window, maybe they won't notice. Walking to my backyard, I caught a glimpse of my living room, and my father was standing up in his pajamas, walking back and forth, talking on the phone. My mother was sitting on the couch with tears running down her cheeks, crouched over in prayer. At that moment, I knew I was in trouble. My mom was in tears, and my dad was rubbing his neck out of stress, not looking far from tears either. After sneaking back into my window, I lay in my bed waiting to either fall asleep or be yelled at by my parents. I ended up falling asleep. Nothing too unusual happened during my sleep. I didn't hear any strange noise or loud banging, but when I woke up, the stairs and door that led to the living room were gone. What was once my staircase and the only way out other than my window was just flat ground, covered in the same hardwood my floor was. Jumping out of bed, I ran to what now was solid ground, trying to make any sense of the situation. How do my stairs just disappear? How did this happen overnight? And how didn't I get woken up by it? An immediate sense of claustrophobia overtakes me. I feel the weight of a truck on my chest as I struggle for breath. I thought of my window, and before the thought fully registered in my mind, I had jumped on my bed and pulled on the window with every inch of my strength. It wouldn't budge, and with a horror I can't describe to this day, I noticed the window was welded shut. I immediately grab any item in reach and throw it at my window, eventually picking up my entire wooden nightstand and slamming it against the glass. It didn't even crack. I got at this for what may have been hours. Eventually, I collapsed out of exhaustion. The only thing I can do now is scream. "Mom, Dad, help me, I'm trapped!" I shout until my voice breaks and tears fill my eyes like a bucket key in a hurricane. They didn't respond. No one came for me. My phone doesn't have service or Wi-Fi. I have a TV and old classic DVDs my dad owns, but that's it. No food, Only water source is the sink in my bathroom. I spend the rest of the day pacing back and forth, intermittently screaming out for help until I notice a figure walking past my window. I jump up to the window and start banging on the glass like a caged chimpanzee. It's my mom. She's sitting on our backyard furniture, just staring into blank space. It looks like she has been crying for hours. Her eyes were blood red and tired. Her face was puffy and downtrodden. I bang even harder on the glass, screaming at her. "Mom, I'm here, please let me out!" She doesn't even move a muscle. What the fuck is happening? Is she ignoring me? Can she just not hear me? There's no way she can't hear me. I'm screaming as loud as I can, and the windows aren't that thick. Did they do this? Is that why she's crying? What kind of twisted parents would do this to their own daughter? I remember laying in bed with these questions racing through my mind over and over. Once night fell, I was still trapped. I laid in bed trying to sleep, hoping it was just a bad dream, or I would wake up and my stairs would be back and everything would be okay. They made their point. I won't ever sneak out or touch weed again. With unimaginable dread, the next morning I woke up and my stairs were still gone. I looked out my window again. Nothing. No one. Just the same patio furniture we have had since I was a toddler. I looked down and noticed all the clocks in my room and even on my phone had stopped. They all froze like a lake in the winter at 3:33 in the morning. The only way I could tell time now was through sundown and sunrise. I tried screaming again. I screamed and I screamed until my vocal cords were about to snap like old brake lines. I'll never forget the panic, like coming out of a car crash. I knew I absolutely had to do something, but I was fighting in a world I didn't even understand. The threat I faced didn't even have any direct attack. It stood ominously in front of me. I can't quite describe it, but just seeing that blank wall in the corner felt like a figure staring me down at the edge of my bed at every waking second. My panic quickly turned into a blind rage. Thoughts of the physical and emotional pain I would subject my parents for putting me here drove me as I picked up my battered nightstand and flung it at the space my door used to be. Over and over with each crash against the wall, the nightstand breaking into smaller and smaller pieces, but the wall stood, not even a chip in the paint. I push my dresser over to the torturous space of nothing and start slamming the now scattered wooden pieces directly into the wall with all the strength I could muster. Nothing. I slumped down and caught my breath. There I sat, alone, trapped in the place I once found comfort in, but now see as a twisted prison cell playing tricks on my psyche. For the rest of the day, I just laid in bed and watched some of the old DVDs I had on my shelf. The next day, I spent what I think was hours just looking out my window. It was fall now. When I became trapped, it was the middle of summer. How did it fast forward 2 months in a single night? My only perception of time was the daylight of my window. Had I really been in here that long? It seems every time I blink my eyes, I lose days. But is it really a loss? What kind of life am I living if I'm just a rat in a lab being experimented on by some demented god? From my perspective at the time of writing this, I have been down here for 25,430 sunsets. Not counting the first few nights, I wasn't keeping track. I'm not hungry, I'm not thirsty, and so much time has passed in my window that I don't even know the people in my backyard anymore. My parents died years ago, but yesterday for me. I can't ask for help. I know better now. I have shouted, cried, broken every piece of art and furniture in my room, and the only change has been a chip in the paint size of my fingernail. This isn't over me smoking weed. I don't even know if this is my parents doing. How could it have been? Ever since the night my stairs vanished, I haven't heard a single creak from upstairs. People walk past every day. What would they say if they learned the suburban home they just walked past has had a girl in the basement for over 60 years? For the first few nights, I remember praying, but I now realize I was praying to my tormentor. If there is a God, he's forgotten me. Elena Santos traced her fingers along the spine of an ancient tome, feeling the leather pulse beneath her touch like something alive. The binding seemed to breathe under her hands, a subtle rhythm that matched neither her heartbeat nor any earthly tempo. 3 months had passed since she'd answered the peculiar job listing, apprentice needed, Traditional bookbinding experience required. Must be comfortable with unusual hours and unique materials. Inquire at 17 Corvid Lane. The address had led her to a narrow townhouse wedged between two larger buildings, its windows reflecting light at odd angles. Even now, Elena couldn't quite remember how many floors it had. The architecture seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at it, windows and gables rearranging themselves like words on a page. The man who opened the door, Jaron Tane, looked exactly as she'd imagined a master bookbinder would. Stooped and ink-stained, wearing a leather apron scarred by countless small burns and chemical spills. His eyes, though, held a feverish intensity that should have been her first warning. "You've come highly recommended," he'd said, though Elena hadn't mentioned her application to anyone. "I've been watching your work at the University Bindery. Such careful attention to detail, such reverence for the written word." His voice had carried strange undertones, harmonics that seemed to resonate in her bones. Behind him, shadows moved in ways that defied the light source, and she caught a whiff of something that reminded her of old pond water in decay. The workshop had seemed normal enough at first glance. Worn wooden workbenches, shelves lined with tools and materials, the comforting smell of leather and glue. But as the weeks passed, Elena began noticing things that didn't quite fit. The rulers sometimes measured different lengths depending on the time of day. The awls left holes that sealed themselves when she wasn't looking. And the shadows. The shadows were always deeper than they should be, pooling in corners like black ink. A fragment of poetry had appeared on her workbench one morning, written in Thomas Reed's distinctive hand. "In spaces between bound pages tight, whispers echo from infinite night." The words had seemed to squirm on the paper, and Elena found herself humming their rhythm as she worked, though she couldn't remember consciously reading them. Now, working in his basement workshop by lamplight, Elena understood why he'd valued those qualities. The books that passed through their hands were like nothing she'd encountered in her training. Some were bound in materials she couldn't identify, leather that felt too warm, cloth that seemed to breathe, metal clasps that moved when touched. Others contained text that seemed to shift when viewed directly, letters crawling across pages like insects searching for new arrangements. All of them carried a weight that had nothing to do with their physical mass. Tonight's project sat before her. A stack of loose pages that had arrived in a leather satchel, delivered by Myrold Rook, the keeper of the script. His hands had trembled as he handed over the package, and Elena noticed that his shadow didn't quite match his movements, always a fraction too slow or too fast. "These are special," he'd whispered, glancing nervously at the shadows between the shelves. "The High Scribe herself has marked them for binding. Our patron grows hungry." He'd hesitated then, pulling something else from his satchel, a small envelope sealed with dark wax. The seal bore a symbol that seemed to shift when Elena tried to focus on it. "From Althesa Varen herself," he'd added, his voice barely above a whisper. "She says you're to read it only after you've completed the binding. She saw something about you in her last trance." The pages felt warm to the touch, and the script that crawled across them made her eyes water. Some bore notations in different hands. She recognized Thomas Reed's poetry, interwoven with the main text, his verses speaking of a darkness that devoured light and a horizon where reality ended. Other margins contained desperate warnings in what she now knew to be Miranda Wells' handwriting. The words breed in dreams. They want more than just readers. They want vessels. Elena's fascination warred with her terror. Part of her wanted to run, to forget everything she'd seen and return to the simple work of binding normal books. But another part, growing stronger each day, yearned to understand the mysteries hidden in these impossible texts. The hunger for knowledge had taken root in her mind, and she found herself wondering if this was how Miranda had felt before she disappeared. "Careful with the binding thread," Jaron called from his desk. "These pages like to wander if they're not properly secured." He was hunched over his own work, transcribing text from one volume to another. Elena had noticed that he often worked in his sleep. his hands moving with mechanical precision while his eyes remained closed, lips forming words in languages that hurt her ears. Sometimes she caught glimpses of other figures moving around him in those moments, shadowy forms that vanished when she tried to look at them directly. The thread she used was unlike any she'd worked with before. It seemed to move of its own accord, sometimes anticipating where she needed it to go. It felt warm between her fingers, like it had just been pulled from something living, and she could have sworn she felt a pulse running through it. As she sewed, she realized she wasn't just binding pages together. She was stitching fragments of reality, creating seams between what was and what waited in the spaces between words. As Elena's needle pierced the warm leather binding, the workshop around her suddenly dissolved. The thread between her fingers turned liquid black, running down her hands like ink, and the world shifted. She stood beneath an impossible sky. Where blue should have been, absolute darkness stretched overhead, a void so complete it seemed to swallow light itself. The sun hung low and bloated, transformed into a massive crimson eye that bathed everything in red twilight. Then she saw the figure. Standing at the intersection of 4 streets was a being both terrible and beautiful. Though human in general shape, 4 arms extended from their frame in perfect symmetry. Their eyes were pools of absolute darkness, streaming tears of blood that traced patterns down their cheeks. Upon their forehead, a strange sigil burned with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. With a jolt of recognition, Elena realized it was the same symbol that had sealed Althesa's envelope. The figure raised all 4 arms to the void black sky. Elena gasped, finding herself back in the workshop, her hands trembling around the half-bound book. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and she quickly wiped it away with her sleeve, trying to steady her breathing. The thread was just thread again, though her fingers still tingled where it had touched them. Making progress? Jaren's voice came from the doorway, making her jump. She hadn't heard him approach. He stood there in his ink-stained apron, looking exactly as he always did, though somehow his shadow seemed darker than usual. "Yes," Elena managed, proud that her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. "The binding is coming along well." She bent her head to her work, hoping he wouldn't notice how her hands shook as she picked up the needle again. Later, while cleaning his tools, Jaren spoke softly, almost to himself. "I was like you once," he said, his voice carrying those strange harmonics. "A simple bookbinder until I understood that some books want more than just to be read. They taught me their language, showed me the spaces between words where truth lives." He turned to her, and for a moment his eyes seemed to contain galaxies. "The Dark One offers knowledge beyond imagining, Elena. The cost—" He smiled, and in the lamplight his teeth gleamed like wet ink. "The cost becomes irrelevant once you understand what waits on the other side of the page." She'd begun having dreams about the books. In them, she watched letters crawl across pages like insects, forming and reforming into messages that left her gasping awake. She dreamed of vast libraries where the shelves went on forever, and all the books whispered her name. Sometimes she heard voices from the workshop below her rented room, though Jaren insisted he never worked past midnight. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper each day, and she often caught movement in them from the corner of her eye. Suggestions of figures walking between the shelves, of hands reaching out from between books. Through these dreams, she began to understand the congregation's structure. Jaren, as the bound archivist, created gateways through his bindings. Myrald Rook, the nervous keeper, distributed the texts to those marked for initiation. Above them both stood Althesa Veron, the High Scribe, who received direct instructions from their patron, the Dark One itself. In these dreams, fragments of what she'd glimpsed haunted her: the void black sky, the crimson sun that shouldn't be, and always that figure, that terrible, magnificent figure whose presence made reality shiver. Her mind recoiled from remembering too much, but the images lingered like after-images burned into her vision. Sometimes when she woke, gasping in the dark, she could still feel the weight of that impossible sky pressing down on her, and her fingers would trace patterns in the air, unconsciously mimicking the sigil she'd seen burning on the figure's brow. A loose page fluttered from the stack. She recognized the university library stamp, though the seal seemed wrong somehow, rotating slowly when she wasn't looking directly at it. The margin contained a neat notation, "Found by M.W." Below that, another hand had added, "Processed for distribution. M. Rook." Elena had heard whispers about Miranda Wells, the librarian who had vanished from Blackmere University. Some said she'd simply left town, but Elena had seen other notes in her handwriting, growing increasingly frantic, speaking of words that bred in dreams and truths that devoured readers. As Elena reached for the page, her sleeve pulled back, revealing the strange marks that had begun appearing on her skin. They looked like ink stains at first, but they moved slightly when she slept, forming letters and alphabets that had never existed in any earthly language. She'd stopped trying to wash them off after noticing that soap and water only made them spread faster. Sometimes, in the right light, they seemed to form words from the texts she'd been binding, prophecies and promises that wrote themselves into her flesh. "You're progressing well," Jaren said, suddenly behind her, though she hadn't heard him move. His shadow on the wall didn't match his movements, and Elena noticed that his apron now bore stains that seemed to gleam with their own inner light. "Soon, you'll be ready to begin the real work." When he smiled, his teeth looked too sharp, too numerous, as if his mouth contained several sets that shifted and changed when he spoke. The realization hit her then. She wasn't just binding books anymore. Each stitch, each carefully aligned page, was helping to bind something larger, reality itself. The books were merely vessels, channels through which something vast and hungry could reach into the world. And she, with her careful stitches and precise alignments, was helping to create the perfect gateway. "There's a gathering tonight," Jaren continued, his voice carrying those strange harmonics that made her bones vibrate. "The Dark One wishes to see your work." He gestured to a bookshelf that Elena could have sworn hadn't been there a moment ago. Few apprentices progressed so quickly to drawing its attention. The shelf held copies of Thomas Reed's latest works, their spines gleaming with an inner light. Elena had helped bind some of them herself, using thread that moved like living things, and leather that felt too warm to the touch. She'd seen how the text changed between readings, how the words rearranged themselves to reveal new horrors to each reader. "The congregation welcomes those who understand the true power of words," Jaren said, producing a small, leather-bound volume from his pocket. "This was your first binding with us. I think you're ready to read it now." The book felt heavy in Elena's hands, its cover warm and slightly yielding, like skin. The pages, when she opened them, contained text in her own handwriting, words she didn't remember writing, describing things she couldn't possibly have seen. Horror and fascination warred within her as she read. Part of her wanted to throw the book aside, to run from the workshop and never look back. But a deeper part, the part that had always loved the secret worlds hidden between pages, understood that she had already chosen her path. Like Miranda Wells before her, like Thomas Reed with his dark verses, she had been drawn into something larger than herself. Elena's hands moved automatically, continuing their work even as her mind reeled from these revelations. The thread wove patterns that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space, binding not just paper and leather, but something else, something that pulsed with ancient hunger. She was no longer just binding books. She was binding realities together, creating gateways between what was and what waited in the spaces between words. Through the basement window, she could see fog gathering in the street, forming shapes that reminded her of letters in a cosmic alphabet. Somewhere in that mist, she knew, other members of the congregation of the Whispering Page were preparing for tonight's ceremony. The bookseller who'd given her the mysterious job listing, the nervous keeper who brought them pages, the poet whose words now crawled across her skin in her sleep. As she completed the final binding, Elena understood at last what Miranda's notes had meant. The words didn't just want to be read, they wanted to be bound, to be given form and substance in our world. With trembling fingers, she reached for Althesa's envelope, breaking the shifting seal. Inside was a single page of thick paper, covered in elegant script that seemed to write itself as she watched. "You've seen it now, haven't you, Elena? The truth waiting in the dark sky. The figure that bridges worlds. We each play our part in what's to come. You with your bindings, me with my visions, Jaren with his translations. The Dark One chooses us carefully, dear Elena. Your hands know the work already, even if your mind hasn't caught up. Bind these pages well. They're more important than you yet realize." Elena's fingers traced the binding she'd just completed, feeling the warmth pulsing beneath the leather. Horror and fascination mingled in her chest. But underneath them both was something else, a deep, thrumming certainty. Every book she'd bound had been a practice run for this moment. Every stitch had taught her hands the patterns they would need. She could run, yes. But the truth was, she didn't want to. The black horizon was coming, and Elena Santos, once a simple bookbinder, would help usher it in, one bound volume at a time. Her hands moved across the leather and paper, each stitch drawing the darkness closer, each page carrying whispers of the truth that waited in the spaces between words. And in the shadows of the workshop, the Dark One watched her work with hungry anticipation, its patience measured in the slow turning of pages and the endless whisper of ancient prophecies. Most families in America can trace their roots back all the way to colonial times, when brave men and women made the pilgrimage, ready to plunder the virgin world awaiting them. My family held deeper roots than most. We can trace our lineage all the way back to the old country and beyond. The Mariani family were spread across the boot, like lice on a mangy mutt. We came from all manner of background and class, to the luxury living gods in the north, to the bitter peasant Marianis to the south. Our ancestors would bicker and clash over every little thing. Century-old grudges still persist to this day. But the one thing to unite our clan, truly unite it, was when an outsider offended us. The Mariani temper became legend, and legend turned to unspoken horror as we grew bold in our retribution. There is all manner of tales I could spin. In the 1800s, for example, Nico Mariani was tending to his vineyard when the town drunk came upon him. He was sullied and vulgar, smelling like week-old manure dipped in vinegar. So the story goes, Nico was appalled at just the sight of the oof and demanded he get away from his vineyard. The drunk laughed in his face, pushed him aside, and pulled out his syphilis-infused prick and began relieving himself all over Nico's prized grapes. The infuriated Nico lunged at the man, coming down on him with blows and curses upon his whole bloodline. The drunk ran away laughing, urine still pouring down his leg. Nico tidied himself up and simply went back to his home. He wrote a letter to the current patriarch of the clan telling him of his grievance, and wrote down the drunkard's name at the bottom of the letter. With a sly smile, he sent that letter off, and within a week the drunkard was found. He was entangled in the bushes, thorny roses slitting his dry skin, his eyes bloodshot and full of fear. He reeked of death and piss, and according to legend, his cock was found stuffed halfway down his throat. Thus became the fate of any a man who befouled our family. As word spread, others would keep their distance. Some members of our clan would even be chased out of their villages. Those same towns soon met with unusual fates, storms sweeping through in the night, plague coming down and wiping them all out. Those of the Mariani clan would claim that God was on their side. We were simply the chosen family of the nation. These boastful morons were just that. They all knew the truth to their petty revenge. To my knowledge, no one knows for sure how it started. Maybe it was one drunken brawl too many, and measures had to be taken to ensure it would always go in our favor. All I knew is the ledger was held by one member of the clan, the patriarch, and passed down eventually. I had glimpsed it only once. It is a brown, leather-bound tome that reeks of age. It's rather unassuming. One might mistake it for a tattered old journal instead of collection of victims. My father, Vincent, was the current keeper of the ledger. He kept it in a locked box under his bed. We didn't talk about it. Every once in a while, he would get a call from some long-forgotten cousin or distant uncle, and a somber look came upon his face. As their petty grievances drone on and on, sometimes he would just sharply cut them off, demanding a name. Then he trudged off to his room and locked it behind him. We didn't see him for the rest of the day. I only know of one time my father wrote a name in for himself. When I was a boy, my mother was killed by a drunk driver. She was jogging in the late afternoon, and a plastered trucker swayed too far to the left and pinned her to a tree. My mother lay splattered on the hood of the gnarled truck as the driver, a man named Arnold, limped away begging for help. He was arrested, of course, but evidently there was some mistake the police made, something about the chain of custody being tainted, and the case was thrown out. Imagine that, murdering a woman and not even batting an eye after the fact. He never once looked ashamed of his actions. He looked more annoyed than anything, like my mother had just gotten in his merry way. My father was beside himself with grief, of course. I could hear him wailing long into the night as he hid himself away. The various cousins had flocked to our house like gulls, offering sorrow in one hand and a hefty plate of pasta in the other. I didn't think they were callous. It was just their way. My Uncle Tony had clamped a gorilla hand on me and pulled me in, muttering it was going all be okay. His breath had a lingering smell of sambuca and cigar smoke. We were sitting in the living room, our clan chattering amongst themselves, leaving my father to his torment alone. They grieved for her, my mother, I know they did. Yet they treated her wake as one big family reunion. In the corner, I heard some of my Tanner cousins slurring at each other in the tongue of the motherland. In the kitchen, I heard the crazed yet harmonic voice of my Uncle Corrado in the kitchen, serenading his wide-eyed nieces and nephews. Uncle Tony could see the miserable look upon my face and gave me a loving smack in the head. "Hey, don't look so miserable, my boy. Your mother is gone, but the family? It'll always be here for you," he said through puckered lips. "Don't you worry either. That son of a bitch is gonna get his." He warned, a tiger's grin forming on his face. "You mean the—" Uncle Tony cut me off with a finger to his lips and a firm grasp on my back. "We don't talk about it here, Bad Karma. It'll be taken care of. That's all you need to know. Let me ask you something, though. How does it work?" I whispered to him, leaning into the man despite wafts of drink and bad cologne emitting from him. "Suppose you'd have to ask your pop about that," he said after a moment. He took a sip from his drink, a long one. "Have my theories, of course. We all do," he admitted quietly. I perked up at this. To be honest, I always just assumed someone within the family took care of things, I admitted uneasily. This got a hearty laugh out of Tony. "Christ, kid, you think we're a—" He tapped his nose. "No, come on, we're a lot of things, but we're an honest bunch. We ain't connected like that," he stated plainly. "The thing with the book, I don't know how it works other than magic, kid. Gotta be. Keeper of the ledger has gotta be a warlock or something like that, using the old Italian black magic on people." Tony slurred. A crazy explanation, and one I would hear at least twice more that night. After I left Tony's charming embrace, I went around and casually asked about the ledger to others. Some laughed it off, others hushed up real quick. Few cousins even thought we were connected after all, said the ledger was a hit list for those who owed certain people too much money. Others said the ledger was a myth, a family fable to make us feel better during hard times. That didn't account for the deadly results of the myth, of course, but they dismissed it as bad luck. In face, that's what some others said as well, that we were blessed and others purely unlucky. I heard it all. Blood magic, a pact with a demon. Ask any member of my family and you would get tangled in a web of conspiracy. The only common answer was, "Your father would know better." That night I decided I would ask him about that solemn task. The rest of the evening was spent with the comfort of relatives and array of pasta and meat. The fridge looked like it had been fully staffed by an olive garden, and the aroma of herbs and garlic clung to the air in desperation. Soon enough I was alone in the house, save my father who was still holed up in his room. It was a deadly sort of quiet in that house, the kind where you can't bear to be alone with your thoughts. I tiptoed up the winding stairs towards my father's room. Stopping at the top, I called out to him. The silence slapped me in the face. My father's door was shut tight, yet I could see light creeping out from the bottom. I approached the oak wood door with a sudden caution, worried that my father had decided to join my mother wherever she rested. I crept towards the door like an unwanted intruder, and to my surprise it creaked open ever so slightly. Light slashed my face, and I winced at the sudden flash of white lightning. I peeked inside and stood frozen at the impossible sight before me. My father sat on his bed, clutching his silk sheets like his life depended on it. His head, frosty with age yet full of hair, was titled upward. His eyes had seemed to roll back into his head, his ghostly whites looking out into nothing. My father was engulfed, no embraced, by a massive pair of feathered wings. The feathers shined bright in the dark, like diamonds shooting out the most blinding light imaginable. The angelic wings were attached to a massive yet slender figure kneeling down behind him. It had to be 9 feet tall as is. I couldn't imagine how large it was standing up. It had flowing golden hair, each strand as bright as a 24-carat star. It dangled its arms over my father's shoulders, like it was straddling an old friend. The arms had these circular growths on them, oval-shaped yet glassy. It was only when I saw the being's face did I realize what those growths were. The being had soft eyes, 8 pairs of them on the face. I could make out no nose or mouth. The being simply had eyes all over. They were white with golden iris placed perfectly in the center, like it had been sculpted by a master craftsman. The longer I looked at this being, the less frightened I became. My fear slowly melted away and was replaced by a soothing voice in my head. It simply told me, "Be not afraid." It was an androgynous voice, yet I swore I could hear the silky tones of my mother's voice in it. I clasped my mouth as tears started to form, yet I knew not why. The eyes on the celestial's arms began to awake, and I felt their curious views on me. The being tilted its head towards me, studying me. That uneasy feeling began to return, like I had seen something I shouldn't have. "Go now, child," the voice commanded softly. "It is not your time yet." The voice was sympathetic, yet oddly harsh. My father stirred slightly, and the being turned its attention back to him, soothing his strained mind. I backed away from the door, my eyes aching from the glow. I rubbed them and stumbled into my own room, ignorant of the thing I had witnessed. I collapsed onto my bed, and the slumbering world stole me into itself. I awoke late into the next day to the sound of my father whistling a merry tune. He knocked on my door and came in, a plate of eggs in hand and his phone in the other. He sat down next to me, offering me both without a word. On the screen was a breaking news story. Arnold Weaver, the man who had murdered my mother and walked free, had been killed. The man had been out celebrating his legal victory at a bar of all places. Early morning he had stumbled out when a neon sign above him collapsed from its scaffolding directly onto the man's head. It had killed him instantly. There were no pictures of the body, simply a cordoned off-street corner and a photo of a cop carrying away the bloody sign. It was a thick neon picture of a beer bottle, the bottom heavy with blood. My father looked pleased in spite of himself. I noticed some wrinkles around his eyes, like he had aged 5 years in one night. I asked him if he was tired, brushing past the news. He smiled sadly and said he was. "Using the ledger for yourself takes more out of you than it normally does. But it was worth it," he explained. "Dad, I looked into your room last night and I began eagerly, but taking one look into my father's eyes was all I needed to clamp shut. Don't worry about that just yet, Leo. I heard you were asking everyone at the wake last night." He spoke softly. "I'll tell you all you need to know for now. The ledger was a gift to our family generations ago. It was meant to protect us and avenge us when it failed. Of course, you've heard some of the things your cousins have asked for. That man at Cousin Sarah's job who got the promotion over her, for example. He scoffed, then winced at the memory. The keeper cannot refuse a request, you see, no matter how abusive the use of its power can be. It takes a part of you every time, Leo. My father died young, as his before, and I'm sure I will as well. There we shall be judged, and I just hope they will look upon us with mercy. He grasped my hands. Do you understand what I'm telling you here? I nodded my head, and to be honest, even now I don't fully grasp it. He accepted my lie, and we went about our days like nothing had happened. This was 6 years ago now, and today is the day I buried my father. It was an aneurysm, or so I'm told. It came for him while he was sleeping. Probably didn't even feel it. We should all be so lucky, my Uncle Tony had said as he gorged himself on wine and pasta. A man pulled me aside during the funeral and explained my father had left me a locked box and a small sum of money as part of his will. He had the box in hand, and I didn't even have to open it. I tucked it away in my coat jacket and thanked the man, who disappeared into the crowd. I felt ill after that and started to leave. An arm caught me as I was out the door. I turned to see my Aunt Rita, her chalky face hidden by a vial of sorrow. She followed me to my car, saying how sorry she was Vincent had passed and how it was the cherry on top of her week. There was new neighbor at her condo, you see. She was young and taken to partying late into the night. Sometimes it would be 10, even 11 p.m. before the music finally died down. She said she wished Sarah Larson had never moved next door to her. She gave me a cold look as she said that, and a peck on the cheek as she said her goodbyes. I just stood next to my car, a sinking fear in my chest I hadn't felt in 6 years. So now I sit in my room, ledger in hand. I stare at the thousands of names etched into this tome. The paper has become cracked and wrinkly. It reeks of mothballs and dust. I have just finished adding the newest name, and now I wait, I suppose. I await the coming of the being, this guardian that has watched our family squander its power over petty grievances. My father was right in the end. I can only hope we aren't judged too harshly. Returning from the Amazon was one of the most exhausting and exhilarating experiences of my life. That trip to South America had been the perfect escape from my suffocating routine as a rising attorney in the United States. After years of hard work, I'd secured a solid position at Marston and Associates, and with a recent promotion offer, life finally seemed to be heading in the right direction. But since I returned, something hasn't felt right. It began with a faint itch on my left arm just below the elbow. At first, I thought it was just a mosquito bite, inevitable after weeks in the Amazon rainforest. I didn't pay much attention to it. I applied some ointment, took an antihistamine, and carried on. But the itch wouldn't go away. 2 days later, it worsened. The small red spot on my arm started swelling, throbbing, as if something alive was inside. Every touch felt like fire burning beneath my skin. At the office, the situation became unbearable. I shifted constantly in my chair, unable to focus on anything but the desperate need to scratch. I clawed at my arm under the desk, trying to hide it, but it was no use. The fabric of my blouse rubbed against the irritated skin, amplifying the agony. "Elizabeth, are you okay?" Clara, a coworker, asked. "Just an allergy, nothing serious," I lied, forcing a smile. She raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but didn't press further. I knew I was drawing attention. My boss, Mr. Marston, frequently walked past my desk, watching me out of the corner of his eye. I couldn't let this jeopardize my promotion, but the pain was becoming unbearable. When the workday finally ended, I rushed home. I closed the door to my apartment, dropped my bag, and went straight to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror and rolled up my sleeve. My heart froze. Where there had been a small red mark, there was now a dark swelling with a black, hardened center, like tree bark. The skin around it was cracked, oozing a yellowish liquid with a nauseating smell. It was as if my skin was rotting before my eyes. I grabbed the strongest ointment I had, but as soon as I touched the wound, the pain exploded. I screamed, tears streaming down my face. The next morning, I went straight to the hospital. I wasn't the kind of person to wait until the last minute to seek help. My mother used to say, "Elizabeth, You're so paranoid you'll die of old age because nothing will ever catch you off guard. At the hospital, the doctor examined the wound with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. He called in another doctor, who then called in two more. They all stared at my arm like it was a nightmare brought to life. "It's a tropical disease," the doctor said after several long minutes. "We'll run some tests." They sent me home with antibiotics and painkillers, but I knew that wasn't enough. Something was growing inside me. That night, I woke up to excruciating pain. It felt like something was moving under my skin, crawling and digging. I ran to the bathroom mirror and tore off the bandages. The wound was now a deep hole, filled with a gelatinous yellow substance. In the center, something moved. My hands trembled as I grabbed tweezers and inserted them into the hole. When I pulled, something came out. It was a worm. Small, white, but alive. It writhed between the tweezers, and I threw it into the sink, nearly vomiting. But when I looked back at the wound, I saw there were more. So many more. The days that followed were hell. I woke up drenched in sweat, my head pounding as if it would explode. The pain in my arm was no longer something I could ignore. It consumed my entire body. The wound grew at an alarming rate. Initially, it was just a foul, black, gaping hole. Now it spread like a cancer, devouring the surrounding flesh, which peeled away in chunks. My clothes clung to my arm, soaked with the viscous liquid that oozed constantly. I spent hours in front of the bathroom mirror, inspecting the pit my arm had become. It was as if something inside was alive. Small ripples in the decaying flesh, like waves on a contaminated lake, revealed their presence. By the third day, after pulling out the third worm with tweezers, I realized I was trapped in an endless cycle. I removed them, but more appeared, always more. I couldn't sleep. Whenever I closed my eyes, I felt the creatures moving inside me, digging deeper into my flesh. I became obsessed. I spent sleepless nights on the bathroom floor, extracting worms with tweezers, needles, anything that could reach them. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop. For every one I removed, two seemed to take its place, and the sound. At first I thought it was in my head, but it wasn't. It was a low, wet rustling coming from my arm, the sound of something scraping against flesh, chewing, burrowing. By the fifth day, the nightmare reached a new level. My left hand went numb. I tried to move my fingers, but they wouldn't respond. When I looked at my arm, the swelling had spread. The skin around it was translucent, almost see-through, revealing long white shapes writhing beneath, rivers of larvae flowing through my body. I vomited on the bathroom floor, the stench of bile mixed with the rotting smell of my arm, making the air unbreathable. I knew they were growing, and I knew they wouldn't stop. It felt like a legion of burning needles was piercing my skin, deeper and deeper each time. The wound was growing alarmingly. At first it was just a black, fetid hole in the center of the swelling. Now it spread like cancer, advancing through the surrounding flesh, which was rotting and falling apart in pieces. My clothes started to stick to my arms, soaked with the viscous liquid that kept dripping constantly. The smell was nauseating, a mix of rotten meat and something chemical, acidic, that seemed to burn my nostrils. I spent hours in front of the bathroom mirror, inspecting that hole that had become my arm. It was as if something inside it was moving. Small ripples in the rotting flesh, like waves on an infected lake, showed that they were there. On the third day, after pulling out the third worm with tweezers, I realized I was caught in an endless cycle. I would remove them, but more would appear, always more. I cried out of frustration and disgust. "Get out of me! Get out!" I screamed, my voice hoarse and desperate, but the worms didn't obey. Each night was worse than the last. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel the creatures moving inside me. The mere thought that they were digging through my flesh kept me awake. I became obsessed. I spent the night sitting on the bathroom floor, pulling out worms with tweezers, a needle, anything I could reach. My body was exhausted, But my mind never stopped. Every time I pulled one out, it seemed like two more appeared. I began to hear sounds. At first, I thought it was just in my head, but it wasn't. It was a low rustling noise, like something wet brushing against flesh, gnawing, burrowing. I knew they were growing. On the 5th day, hell reached a new level. My left hand began to tingle. Then, it went numb. I tried to move my fingers, but they wouldn't respond. When I looked at, I start. My skin was greenish and damp, gleaming with a sickly, oily sheen. I called an Uber to take me to the hospital. When the driver stopped in front of the building, I hesitated for a moment. I tried to cover my arm with a cloth to hide the deplorable state it was in, but the fabric quickly became soaked with the yellowish liquid that leaked incessantly. I got in the car, hoping he wouldn't notice. "Good morning," I tried to say, but my voice came out hoarse, almost inaudible. The driver, a middle-aged man with a friendly expression, smiled through the rearview mirror, but his expression changed as soon as the smell reached him. "Are you okay?" he asked, wrinkling his nose and cracking the window a bit. "It's just an infection. I'm going to the hospital." He nodded but kept the windows open throughout the entire ride. I saw him rub his nose several times, and his glance in the rearview mirror was filled with distrust. The smell was getting worse. It was the smell of death. When I finally arrived at the hospital, I staggered through the front door. The people in the waiting room instinctively moved away, some covering their mouths, others wrinkling their faces in disgust. I was taken directly to the emergency room. The doctor who attended to me was the same as before, but his serious expression indicated that he knew the situation had gotten out of control. He could barely hide his own reaction to the smell. "Elizabeth, what happened?" he asked, while putting on gloves and a mask. I don't know. It's getting worse. It's growing." He looked at my arm, now practically unrecognizable. The wound had turned into a grotesque opening filled with necrotic flesh and viscous secretions. The center pulsed as if it had a life of its own, and the edges were covered in small worms crawling in and out, as if they were digging tunnels. It was as if they were digging tunnels. "We need to act immediately. This is no longer just an ordinary infection," he said, calling for other doctors. I was rushed into the operating room. The nurses' faces were a mix of professionalism and horror, as if they were trying not to think about what they were seeing. The room was cold, and the bright lights reflected off the metal surgical instruments. "We'll need to amputate the arm, Elizabeth," the doctor said, holding my healthy hand to try to comfort me. "There's no other option. It's spreading too quickly." I simply nodded. I no longer had the strength to protest. All I wanted was for it to stop. They sedated me partially, but I remained conscious enough to feel the first incision. When the scalpel cut into the flesh around the wound, a collective scream echoed through the room. Larvae were raining down. From the cut, a torrent of white worms exploded like a geyser. They were larger than the ones I had seen before, thicker, almost translucent, with quick and frantic movements. The nurses recoiled, some screaming, others dropping instruments on the floor. "My God," murmured the doctor, while trying to stay calm. The worms fell to the floor and began to spread throughout the room, crawling in all directions. The stench emanating from them was even stronger, a wet, rotting smell that seemed to fill every corner of the space. The doctor continued cutting, desperate to sever my arm from the rest of my body. But the worms didn't stop. They appeared from every side, burrowing into my flesh as if they were living roots, connected to my own body. The pain was unbearable, even with the sedatives. I could feel every movement, every bite, every slide of their viscous forms. "We need to finish this now," the doctor shouted, wielding a surgical saw to cut through the bone. But as he began to saw, more worms came out, this time faster, as if trying to escape. One climbed up his glove, crawling to his wrist. "Get this off me," he shouted, as another nurse tried to help him. The operating room was in chaos. The floor was covered in blood, pus, and worms. Surgical instruments were scattered around, and the nurses didn't know where to run. I could feel that this wasn't going to end there. The arm wasn't the only place they were. They had already spread throughout my entire body. "Doctor," I whispered, my voice almost inaudible. "It's no use. They're everywhere." He looked at me, his face pale and filled with horror. For a moment, I thought he was going to pass out. "Elizabeth, I'm so sorry." And then my vision darkened. I looked at my hands, but they were no longer mine. My skin was full of holes, and worms were coming in and out as if I were just a vessel. The chill began not with a scream, but with a laugh. A goofy, carefree sound from the depths of my own head. I sat up in bed with a jolt, wrapped in my blankets, the digital clock blinding me with 3:17 a.m. My skin was slick with sweat. Just a nightmare, I reassured myself, coaxing my racing heart to calm. But the laugh remained, an echo of something wrong. Morning came, tinting the sky with shades of bruised purple and tentative gold. I dragged myself from bed, the lingering fear holding on to me like cobwebs. Coffee, black and powerful, was my sole protection from the insidious fear. My phone vibrated. A message from Mom. "Don't forget Mark's birthday dinner this evening. He's really excited to see you." Mark? The name scratched at the back of my mind. An itch I couldn't quite scratch. "Who's Mark?" I texted back, a flicker of confusion igniting in my chest. The reply was instant. "Don't be silly. Mark, you're practically brother. You've known him since you were a kid. Don't tell me you forgot." She even threw in a laughing emoji, as if this was some grand joke. But it wasn't a joke. I didn't know Mark. Not even a shard of recognition glimmered in my mind. "Mom, I'm serious," I typed back, my fingers shaking a little. "I don't know who Mark is. I've never met anyone by that name." She didn't answer. Panic scratched at my throat. I sprinted to the bookshelf, yanking out photo albums, their covers cracked and worn. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, school graduations, the milestones of my life in grainy photographs. And there he was, Mark, a steady figure, a smiling face in the periphery of every milestone. He was tossing a football with me at my 10th birthday, shoulder to shoulder with my sister at my high school graduation, even raising a glass at my 21st birthday party. He was everywhere, but I didn't remember him at all. Desperate, I moved. I took my keys, a sense of panic driving me in circles in my mind. My sister, she'll remember, my best friend. They'll recognize that this is not right. My sister Sarah opened the door, smiling brightly. "Hey, Mark's birthday now?" The words struck me as if I had been physically hit. I felt my head reel. "Sarah, who is Mark?" I begged, my voice hoarse with fear. "I've never met him. This doesn't make any sense at all." She looked at me, her smile wavering. "What are you talking about? Mark, he's been here forever. Don't you recall all the summers we spent at his family's lake house? The time he rescued you from the pool when you were going to drown?" I shook my head, my eyes welling up with tears. "No, none of that ever happened. I don't remember any of it." I stared at my good friend Chloe, hoping and praying she'd explain to me that Sarah was joking, playing some vicious trick on me. Chloe merely gave me a blend of concern and puzzlement, though. "Are you okay? You've seemed really out of it today. Of course you know Mark. He's pretty much part of the family." We stuffed into Chloe's car, Sarah and I in the back, Chloe behind the wheel, the silence heavy with unasked questions. My head spun, attempting to get a handle on what was occurring. Closing my eyes, I struggled to remember my childhood, to find some shred of evidence that Mark was ever in my past. Nothing. Then a flicker, a burst of images, broken and confusing. Me laughing with Mark, keeping secrets beneath a starry night sky, walking hand in hand. Memories that weren't my own. Memories being implanted, jammed into my mind. It was as if I was seeing a warped movie reel, pieces of another life I'd never lived imposed on the life I knew. A tide of sickness spilled over me. I gasped, grabbing at my head, the implanted memories threatening to engulf me. We got to Mom's place. I stumbled out of the vehicle, my legs leaden. I needed evidence. I needed to discover something, anything that would validate that I wasn't losing my mind. I rushed to my former bedroom, dodging Mom's cries, and furiously started up my computer. Emails, texts, Facebook. I needed to dig into every digital aspect of my existence for proof that I was not insane. And there it was. Years-old emails from Mark, Facebook messages with those inside jokes, photographs with his name. I had responded to his messages, sent multiple emails, engaged with him online as if he were a permanent figure in my life. But I couldn't recall any of them. My mother shouted out, "Dinner's ready!" Her voice sounded abnormally cheerful, almost forced. I came out of my room, my heart racing against my ribcage, a chill of fear in my belly. And that's when I saw him. He was in the living room, standing beside my mother, his arms slung carelessly around her shoulder. Mark. He wasn't what I imagined, not ugly, not terrifying, just normal. Average height, brown hair, forgettable features. He resembled the kind of person you'd pass on the sidewalk and never give a second glance. And yet, his presence dominated the room with an overbearing weight, a crushing feeling of wrongness. His gaze met mine, and a slow, creepy smile crossed his face. It wasn't a welcoming smile. It was a smile that knew something I didn't know. A smile that threatened something awful was going to occur. It was the smile of a predator. A shock, a shivering breath. I awoke. 3:17 a.m. again. Sweating, I sat upright in bed, my heart pounding against my ribcage. This time the giggle wasn't a distant whisper. It was nearer, more tangible. My phone beeped. Mom again. "Don't forget Mark's birthday dinner tonight. He's really looking forward to seeing you." The message was the same, word for word. I hurled the phone across the room, a strangled cry escaping my mouth. It was happening again. This was not a dream. This was real. I got out of bed, clamoring for something that would ground me in the real world. I glanced at my room, hoping for something, anything, that would attest to the fact that I wasn't going crazy. My eyes landed on a framed photo on my dresser. It was one of my dad and me, taken when I was a child. I hadn't seen it in years. Except, it wasn't just my dad and me anymore. By my dad's side, his arm slung over my shoulder, was Mark. The same bland face, the same creepy smile. He had taken my father's place in my own mind. I could feel a scream rising in my throat, a raw howl of rage and terror. My memories were being stolen from me, rewritten, replaced with this thing. I sprinted to the mirror, gazing into my reflection, searching for any indication that I was indeed myself. A few seconds passed before the edges of my reflection's mouth twisted into that same unnerving smile. It leaned in and said softly, "You're ready, kiddo." The voice was mine, yet it wasn't me. I slammed the door closed and I ran, pushing open my bedroom door. Mark was there, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, that awful grin on his face. "Why are you doing this?" I gritted out, my voice shaking. "What do you want?" He merely laughed, that low, queasy sound. "I'm not doing anything," he told me, speaking in a low, strangely calm voice. "You're always doing this." He grasped my arm, his hold much stronger than I expected, and steered me toward my Aunt Mina's. It had been years since I'd last seen her. Why would he want to see her? "I want to go inside with you," he murmured into my ear. I barely heard him. We arrived at Mina's house. There was a frantic hope that leapt within me. Perhaps she knew. Perhaps she remembered the world as it ought to be. The world before Mark. I ran up to the door, knocking frantically until Mina opened it, her eyes opening wide with shock. "What are you doing here?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "You shouldn't have come." "Mina, please," I pleaded, grasping her hands. "You have to assist me. I don't know what is occurring. My memories, they're being altered." There is this man, Mark. He is taking the place of everyone I know. Mina stepped back, her face twisted in terror. They're going to make you right, she breathed, her eyes flicking towards Mark, who stood behind me, his eyes following me with the same knowing grin. They want to make you right before they wipe you out. Wipe me out? I breathed, my blood congealing in my veins. What do you mean? Wipe me out of what? Mina paused, her eyes shining with a desperate, entreating expression. You're not the first, she whispered. There was one before you, and they'll do it again. They'll replace you, the way they replaced her. Another me. Replaced. My head spun, attempting to follow through the urgency of her words. I was a replacement? For another person? I parted my lips to speak to her further, to require answers. But then, it occurred. Mina's eyes turned glassy, her muscles locked up, and her face blanked out. Her pupils expanded, her eyes losing all familiarity. It was as if a switch had been thrown, removing everything that made her. Her. Mina? I whispered, gently shaking her. Mina, can you hear me? She blinked, her eyes now vacant and clear. Oh, hey, she said, her voice now cheerful and light, as if nothing was amiss. What are you doing here? She remembered nothing. She remembered no conversation. She remembered no fear in her eyes. She remembered no warning she had just issued me. She had been erased. Mark moved towards me, putting a hand on my shoulder. See, he whispered, his voice soothing and gentle. I told you, you're always doing this. Do what? I breathed, my voice breaking. What am I doing? He grinned, a slow, predatory smile that made me shiver. You always forget. Celine, right as I had finally memorized and grown accustomed to the noises each step my mother and father make in our home. The night sky had decided to come forth, and the scorching sun took its ray of light and heat to slumber, and so did we. I go in my room and turn the lights off. As I was coming closer to my bed, the sound of me, my mother and father's footsteps could be heard echoing across the house. We all had gone to sleep. It was 3 a.m. That is the time when I woke up to a strange, loud noise, followed by the sound of footsteps. Petrified and half awake, I stayed in bed, hiding under the sheets, ears open to hear any sound that was coming from downstairs. That is, when I realized those were not the footsteps of anyone I know. Realization hit me, followed by fear, and a chilling feeling that gave me the shivers. I could hear him, or her. You can't really tell who or what it was. All you could hear was its footsteps, and that it isn't Mom nor Dad. Knock, knock. My eyes open wide. I am now wide awake, taking a peek from under my sheet. The sound of knocking is at my door, but who could it be? Even though the room was dark, it was almost as if you could even see the door trembling with each knock. Knock, knock. That thing behind the door kept knocking. Me, as I am wide awake now, cowering in fear under my sheets, couldn't even move to answer the door. And to be honest, even if I could, I don't think I'd have the courage to. I could feel my heart sinking, my lungs breathing heavily as fear began seeping into me. Knock, knock. The thing was persistent. Then I look at the time. It was an old clock that has always been in my room ever since we moved in. 3:05 a.m. I look in shock. Only 5 minutes have passed. How can this be? Knock, knock. Driven by shock and frustration, I decide to accept my fate. The paralyzing fear had calmed down, still shivering from the unknown that was waiting for me behind that door. Knock, knock. I hop out of bed, wearing my pajamas. Yes, those pajamas my mom and dad bought me a couple of weeks ago. I was wondering if this is the end for me. Will I ever wear those pajamas again? My hand, cold as ice due to loss of blood circulation in my hand, reaching out for the door handle. The cold breeze in the room from the open window I forgot to close before I went to sleep. My eyes drifting everywhere, wondering what to do. I open the door. And there it was, a dark humanoid figure. I was rather young, so at the time I thought it was my dad, since it looked like a man, in his 30s. Foolish little me felt a sense of relief, and at the same time, curiosity. Why could I not tell it was my dad? Why is he just standing there, in the darkness? Many questions, many possible answers. But one thing was clear. That thing was not my father. Little me, so young and foolish, jumps at it, joyfully yelling out, "Dad, Dad, you scared me." Alas, the thing did not respond. Instead, all I could feel was its cold body. It almost didn't even feel like a body, as it was not human, more like a manifestation, a pretender. There was no heartbeat, no breathing. Actually, it did breathe, but its lungs didn't move. It was as if looking at a deaf person who could breathe and move. Young me at that time had realized that was no human, or at least not one that I was familiar with at my young age. And now that I'm older, I'm sure you and me both realize that there really are no humans like that. Shocked from what I had just witnessed, I rushed to my parents' rooms as I noticed that thing was just standing there, focused on my room. Yet to my surprise, as I reached the stairs, my heart sinks to the floor and my breathing intensifies when I saw it. That thing hiding in the darkness, in the blink of an eye, turned its face towards me. Now that it was facing my direction, you could clearly see the look on its face. It had eyes, but couldn't see, or so I assumed, since they were pitch black. It didn't have ears, or at least I didn't see any due to its long black hair. It was no usual hair. It looked almost like clay. It didn't have the physics of normal hair, almost as if looking at a mangled mannequin. I sprint to my parents' room. I hear the thing let out a deafening roar, sending chill down my spine. Tears begin rolling down my cheeks, but I don't stop. I can't stop. Stop running and who knows what will happen. I could hear it, its footsteps as I ran, this time, however much faster. Little me, with his tiny legs, tried the best he could to outrun it. What used to be unknown just minutes ago was now charging at me in efforts to catch me. Heavy breathing was traversing the air, screams were echoing, growling noises were heard, loud footsteps, tear marks on the ground. One little boy and an unknown trespasser who, for unknown reasons and unknown goals, wanted to catch him. There it was, the door. I could feel the sense of hope, and the numerous times I thought to myself, "I can do it! I'm almost there! Mom, Dad, I'm almost there!" Looking back, the thing was right behind me, glaring at me, growling and reaching out for me. With my last strength I had left, I immediately reached out for the handle, opened the door, and closed myself inside. There I was, lying down on the ground. I could hear that thing again, knocking. I was so tired and so relieved that I outran it that I had forgotten my sole reason for even coming to this room in the first place. As I was lying down, catching my breath, I noticed a musty smell in the room. Something was wrong. My parents' room has never smelled so unpleasantly before. I stood up, brushed all the dust off my so precious pajamas. Although those were the least of my concerns at the moment, because right in front of me were two bodies, deformed to such unrecognizable forms that one would mistake it for a different animal. Unfortunately for me, it was clear that those two were my parents. Knock, knock. The knocking sound was back, this time more aggressive than before. I panicked. What do I do? It's right there. Mom, Dad. Knock, knock. I start quietly sobbing and decide that if my time has arrived, then so be it. Using my last efforts, I put my cold, shaky hand on my mouth in attempts to be quieter. Close my eyes and lie on the ground with my two parents' bodies on top of me. And then it happened. The knocking intensified, faster and louder than before, till it eventually barged in through the door. My vision was blocked. All I had was my hearing. My nose was clogged with the grim smell the bodies were letting out. Slow footsteps were approaching. All that was going through my mind was, "Please don't find me. Please don't find me." The thing, almost as if reading my mind, went out of the room. Next to my parents' bedroom was my dad's office. He always told me to never go in there, for unknown reasons. However, my parents' bedroom was the worst place to hide in at the moment, as it was the last location it saw me in. I crawled towards the office, holding my breath, tears and cries in. You could hear it looking for me upstairs. I gently grabbed the door, which was excruciatingly hard, as I couldn't stop myself shaking in fear. The door opens. Cold breeze hits me in the face, coming from inside the room. You can hear the sound of papers being blown from the wind. I go inside and use my little strength to push some old small couch to the door, in hopes to somehow block it from entering. Although we all know that would never work with a small couch like that. On my dad's desk, you could see his laptop, papers, the pen he was always writing with whenever I used to come here to tell him that Mom's calling us for dinner. I miss my parents so much. I say, I have to make it out of here. I was very young. You would probably suggest to use the laptop to call for help, but we can't just assume I know the password. At the far right corner, I glimpsed a landline phone, the ones that nowadays would be called ancient. I probably got the emergency number wrong a couple of times due to panicking and being unable to keep my thoughts straight. Eventually, I dialed 911 and help was coming. The person on the other end of the line seemed very level-headed and managed to calm me down a bit as I was hiding under my dad's desk. A couple of minutes later, loud noises echo through the walls, and for some time after that, quietness had took over the house. A moment after that, I could hear the sirens of the ambulances and the police cars coming to my home, and I decided to go out of the room and meet them at the entrance. The thing was nowhere to be found. All that was left of the scene were my parents, both gone. Me, shivering in fear, and a couple of broken furnitures. I don't know what it was, who it was, where it is, or what it wanted. All I know was that it meant no good. And even though I saw its appearance, you could say it's still unknown, as it was so unusual that you can't even describe it unless you see it for yourself. A couple of years later, I'm at my office, writing this to you, since the only actual characters in this story are me, my parents, and you. That thing is still not found. It's lurking, possibly knocking at someone else's door right now, walking around inside someone else's home. Whatever it is, whatever it wants, do not answer the door. Don't let it know that you're in there. Don't let her fool you. I tilted my head as I read my mother's strange text. There was no context in a previous conversation or build-up to warrant the strange, cryptic message. I hadn't texted my mother in a few hours, and even then, it was to remind her to pick up dog food on her way home from church that night. "Who are we talking about?" I replied and waited. Nothing. My dog Lucy suddenly lifted her head before letting out a series of loud barks as she ran towards the front door. The unexpected loud noise caused me to jump in my seat. My dog stared at the door and barked intensely. The door's window looked obscured by the darkness of the night outside, like an inky veil hiding whatever was making my dog nervous just behind it. I slid off my gaming headphones and began approaching the door. As I stepped down the hallway towards the door, I felt a strange unease as I looked at the doorknob, unlocked. We always lock our doors once the sun sets, but with my parents gone and myself distracted by my game, the thought of doing so had escaped my mind. As I reached the door, I quickly moved my hand and locked it before flipping on the porch light. The curtain of darkness was pulled back to reveal an empty porch. I scanned what little of the yard I could see through the window, looking for any sign of movement in the darkness, but there was none. I shooshed my dog, assuming she was alerting over a bad dream or a reflection she saw in the window. She stopped barking, but remained alert, staring at the door with perked ears. I went around the house, locking the other two entrances before sitting back down on the couch. I took out my phone and looked down at my mother's message again. "Don't let her fool you." I clicked the call button. At this point, I was wondering if she had meant to send the message to someone else. If she hadn't, though, I wanted to know who the message was talking about and how they were trying to fool me. The phone rang a few times before going to voicemail. Lucy came over and sat down next to me, looking around the room with great unease. "What's gotten into you?" I said as I reached down and patted her head. Without warning, Lucy lurched to her feet and began barking intensely at the back door now. Startled, I tried calming her, but she refused to be pulled away or settled. "There is nothing out there," I said, as I ran my hand over the hackles across her back, her barking refusing to stop. I stepped to the door and pulled the string that opened the faux blinds that obscured the window. See, no one is there. I flipped on the light to the back porch to get a better view. As the light illuminated the porch, that was when I saw it on the door, something that was unnoticeable without the light from outside. A small round patch of fresh condensation on the outside of the window. I looked closer, not understanding at first what I was looking at or the implication it brought. I stepped back as the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Something was just standing right outside my door. I jumped as I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Taking it out, I could see a new text from my mother. "I need your help. I'll be home soon." I quickly began typing out a reply. "Mom, something weird is going on here. I think someone is walking around the house." After sending the message, I remembered the cameras my parents had installed on the four corners of the house. I figured if someone was sneaking around and looking for a way to break in, they would show up on the camera. The app buffered for a few seconds before opening to the live camera view. I sat surprised as I looked at the screen. 3 of the 4 cameras were offline. Confused, I opened the motion recording section of the app. Think perhaps the cameras caught something before going offline. Nothing. There wasn't a single recording on the app. It was as though all the footage had been deleted and the recording feature turned off. An even more eerie feeling began to creep over me. I gasped as I backed out to the live camera page. The last camera was now offline. I opened the phone app and hovered my thumb over the keypad, about to dial 911. It could be nothing. Just a dog acting strange, a random server issue with the cameras, and weird airflow causing the wet spot on the window. But I wasn't willing to take that kind of chance. If there was someone out there, then I needed someone here. I had just finished typing in the 3 numbers when a sharp series of knocks rang out from my front door. My heart sank and I flinched as Lucy ran back to the front door, letting out a new flurry of her aggressive barks. I stepped into the hallway and stared at the door. I could see the faint silhouette of a person standing on the porch, but any details were swallowed up by the darkness of the night. As I stared at the figure, I heard a voice coming through the door. "Sweetheart, it's me. Come open the door." The voice sounded familiar, but completely new at the same time. "Who's there?" I called out, taking a few steps down the hallway. "It's your mom, silly. I forgot my keys when I left for the store. I need you to open the door so I can get started on dinner." A cold chill ran down my spine. My mother has a unique voice. Whoever was standing on the other side of the door was trying to replicate it. Certain parts of the cadence were spot on, but little things just felt wrong. "My mother is at church," I called out. "I don't know who you are, but you need to leave now before I call the police." A thick silence filled the air as I waited for a response. "I picked up some cosmic brownies at the store. I know they are your favorite. Please come open the door for me." I don't know what disturbed me more in that moment, the way she ignored my threat and kept up the charade, or the fact that she knew my favorite snack. "I'm calling the police. You need to get..." Thud. The woman stepped up to the door and slammed her fist against it. I could see her better now. The light from inside the house shone through the window and illuminated her rage-filled eyes. Lucy barked more aggressively at the better view of the woman. Lucy was always standoffish to strangers, but the way that was acting was way more aggressive than I had ever seen her before. "You will open this door this instant!" she yelled, still trying to imitate my mother's voice. "I am your mother, and you will do as you're told." As I looked at the woman, a new sense of dread passed over me. The woman was not my mother, but she looked like her. She wore the same hairstyle, her head shape and nose looked the same. She was even wearing an outfit I could have sworn I had seen my own mother wear before. But she wasn't my mother. There were small details. Different ears, eyes slightly too far apart. The woman looked as though her and my mom could do the doppelganger trend together. At a passing glance, you might mistake the two, but I knew my mother. This wasn't her. I hit the call button on my phone and placed it to my ear as I stepped back further from the door, the quiet ringing sound music to my ears. "I'm calling the police now!" I yelled. "Get out of here!" Thud. Thud. The woman's fist slammed against the window of the door. "Open the damn door!" she screamed, no longer hiding behind the imitation. "You will listen to your mother, or I'll give you a reason to be afraid." The 911 operator picked up and asked me what the emergency was, her calm, questioning voice feeling inappropriate given the fear I was feeling in that moment. I quickly recited my address as the woman at the door began pounding on the door harder, screaming vile obscenities between calm moments where she would plead for me to open the door in a now shattered impression of the woman that raised me. "Please hurry," I pleaded. "She is really trying to get in now." Crack. My heart sank as I saw a small crack form around the woman's hand as it slammed against the door. Without leaving another second to pass, I turned and ran. This woman was getting in the house, and I needed to find a place to hide before it was too late. I ran to the kitchen. My head spun as I considered my options, my brain distracted by the woman's screaming and pounding mixed with Lucy's incessant barking. I grabbed a kitchen knife and ran to my parents' bedroom, turning off the lights as I ran to hide my movements. I went into their walk-in closet and tucked myself into the back corner, covered behind layers of my father's coats and shirts. My whole body jumped as I heard the window shatter, followed by a pained scream from the woman. "Look what you made me do!" she screamed before her voice suddenly calmed to a sickening sweet tone. "This cut is really bad, sweetheart. Can you bring me a Band-Aid?" "She's in the house," I whispered into the phone. The 911 operator instructed me to stay silent and in place while help was on the way. I could hear Lucy running around the house, barking wildly. She wasn't a small dog, but she wasn't the type to actually get violent if push came to shove. I could hear the woman walking around the house calling out for me in my mother's voice. "Sweetheart, this is all a misunderstanding. Come out and see me. Let me hold you." From the sound of it, she was looking around the kitchen and living room. "Lucy is acting really strange," she called out. "Maybe that diet we put her on has her acting weird. Come take a look at her for me." We had put Lucy on a special diet a few weeks before. We hadn't told anyone, but she knew. "You always did like playing hide and seek when you were little," she said as I heard her step into my parents' room. "Even when no one else was playing. Just come out and see me." I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't breathe. I muted my phone so the operator's voice wouldn't be heard. I kept silent in crippling fear for my life. Every second an eternity. Every sound of an approaching footfall met with a further deepening pit in my stomach. "You were always so disobedient." She spoke softly, her voice stifling anger. "You were always my least favorite, but I still love you." I heard the clicking sound of the closet door as she turned the doorknob. "You should appreciate our family the way I do." I heard the door swing open. I could see flickers of light from the bedroom dance between the drapes that covered me. I knew any moment the horrid impersonator would pull back the clothes and kill me. I gripped the knife tighter. I have never been a fighter. I knew between my fear and lack of experience I didn't stand a chance. I would fight, but I knew I would fail. Her hauntingly soft voice filled the closet. "We'll have such lovely family time to get..." Her voice was cut off by the sounds of police sirens pulling down our road. She waited a moment and then sighed deeply. "So bad," she whispered before I heard her footsteps quickly retreating out of the room. I began to hyperventilate as I heard the police call out as they made their way into the house. I couldn't believe the ordeal was over. I walked in shock as the police led me through the house that was covered in the blood trail. Lucy followed us around, refusing to leave my side. I sent up a small prayer thanking God that the lady didn't do anything to Lucy besides scare her. The police took me outside and questioned me on the events while other police scoured the area trying to find the woman. They never did. When my parents arrived home, I clung to them and cried in my mother's arms. Through my labored cries, I asked the only question I could think to ask at that moment. Who was she? How did you know? My mother looked at me confused. How did I know what, sweetheart? The woman. You sent those text messages. My mother's face went pale. I haven't had my phone all night. I forgot it when I went to church. It was in the house somewhere. I looked down at my phone while trying to grasp the terrifying facts of the situation. The woman had been in the house at some point without me even knowing it. Suddenly my phone vibrated in my hand. A Facebook notification. My mother had tagged me in something. I opened the notification for my phone to take me to a small, simple post only a few seconds old. It was 2 pictures. The first was a family photo we had taken a few years ago when we went on vacation to Disney World. The second photo was a photo of me, standing at the front door, looking out the window. Above the photos was a small line of text that simply read, "I love my family." Growing up, I attended what I thought was a charismatic church that, in hindsight, I realize was an apocalyptic cult. They had a lot of strange rituals and customs, but none more important than speaking in tongues. The church believed that if one prayed and begged hard enough, and if they were worthy, they would be able to speak in the language of heaven, and by doing so, it would be a sign of a divine presence residing inside of you, and that once you had this gift, you would be raptured and spared from the coming apocalypse on earth and the eternal torment of the afterlife. If you hadn't yet spoken in tongues, you wouldn't go to heaven when the rapture, the moment when the saved ascended to heaven, occurred. You'd be left on earth to experience the apocalypse, and when you died, you'd burn in hell for eternity. That's a lot for a kid to process. The way to get this gift of the Spirit was to go up to the front of the church during the altar call, which happened toward the end of every service, right after the collection plate was passed. The congregation, traumatized by the pastor's frequent and vivid descriptions of the eternal torment awaiting the unsaved, would gather around the altar, praying for the gift of tongues for themselves or members of the church who hadn't yet received it. Those who didn't have it were instructed to pray, praise God, and beg for the gift. We do this regularly, desperately, and the altar calls could last for hours. Imagine it. Children and adults all crowded around the red-carpeted steps of the altar, screaming, spraying saliva, sobbing, praying, sweating, and placing their hands on each other, all pleading for this gift, genuinely expecting the rapture to happen at any moment. Honestly, I spent most of my childhood and early teens trying to receive this elusive gift. I spent countless hours at the altar, begging and pleading with God to grant me the one thing that would save me from hell. Night after night, surrounded by screaming adults, I begged God until my voice was raw. To add insult to injury, it seemed like at every altar call, someone around me received the gift. To my left or to my right, someone would begin babbling incoherently, collapse to the ground, and then be helped up to their feet by a celebrating congregation. But despite all my efforts and sincerity, each night it was denied to me. Eventually, the crowd around the altar would disperse. Late at night, often around midnight, the service would finally end, and we'd go home. I'd spend the drive back staring out the car window at the night sky, my clothes damp with sweat, and my throat sore from pleading with a God who refused to answer. Growing up, the fear of hell, the apocalypse, and eternal damnation was a real force in my life. I can remember times when my mom came home late from work, and I was convinced she'd been raptured, leaving me behind. I'd hide in my closet, clutching some sort of improvised weapon, a broom, a steak knife, etc., certain that the damned would soon kick in the front door. For what purpose? Maybe to eat me or sacrifice me to Satan. I wasn't sure what the damned did, but I knew it couldn't be good. All this made for an interesting, high anxiety, and, at times, sleep-deprived childhood. When I was around 16, the pastor started preaching that the rapture was particularly imminent. We began having service every night about the coming apocalypse, and the importance of speaking in tongues for the unsaved. The pastor warned that hell would be infinitely worse for people like me who knew the truth, but hadn't accepted the gift. This was especially frustrating for me. I was trying so hard. After the collection plate was passed, we had the inevitable altar call, and at each of them I tried harder and harder to speak in tongues. But it still wasn't happening. I started to think maybe I was immune or something. Finally, after an especially long altar call, the pastor took me aside and told me, in a voice filled with compassion, concern, and perhaps a hint of exasperation, that if I just repeated the word hallelujah over and over again, God could use it as a foothold to enter my heart and grant me the gift. At the next altar call, I gave it a try. I knelt at the altar shouting hallelujah over and over again. I was helped by an older man in the church who often mentored and prayed with the young boys, either one-on-one at his house, which he preferred, or at the altar. He considered this his calling. This oddly, overly affectionate man, a self-proclaimed prayer warrior, whispered words of encouragement in my ear as he knelt behind me, rubbing his hands tenderly across my sweating back and shoulders. Hallelujah! I shouted, again and again. My arms waved, my body swayed, and my knees ached. My throat was raw and my voice was fading. The words began to run together, syllables dropping and merging. This only excited the people around me, especially the man behind me. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! I kept shouting faster and faster. Exhausted, the words blurred into nonsense. Around me, the church members screamed and prayed with ecstatic fervor. The pastor, now kneeling in front of me, tangled her fingers in my hair with one hand, grabbed my chin with the other, and brought her fleshy face close to mine, pressing her puckered lips against my ear. "No, say it like this," she whispered, her breath hot, moist, and intrusive. And then she began repeating the word hallelujah, improvising like a jazz musician, creating her own excited babble of syllables to accompany mine. Behind me, the man prayed harder, his breath hot on my neck, his body pressed close to mine. His hands moved roughly over my shoulders and back. He whispered in my ear, urging me to pray harder, harder, to let it inside me. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! I tried to keep shouting, but my voice faltered, my words turning to mush. The crowd erupted in a frenzy of excitement. The word blurred, lost its meaning, became a nonsensical noise. My throat burned, my body trembled. The pastor kept whispering in my ear, but her voice seemed to change. The word she kept repeating was now unrecognizable. The first syllable, a percussive exhalation. The second, a wheezing gasp. The third, obscenely stretched out. The last, almost a cry of pain. Her wet lips squirmed against my ear like worms. I felt her tongue in my ear, her voice in my head, and suddenly something shifted. The air grew thick and cold. The sounds around me suddenly muffled and distant. I felt like I was submerged in dark water. A strange presence loomed all around me. No, inside me. A watching, waiting, something. I felt 1,000,000 miles away, and a coldness crept into my chest, an internal ocean of black water teeming with something dark and squirming, rising up my throat and bursting out of my mouth. It hurt. I started screaming. We all seemed to be screaming in unison, and the lights were flickering, and suddenly I was being helped to my feet. I had apparently blacked out, collapsing face forward onto the steps of the altar. It wasn't an unusual occurrence at the church. They called it being slain by the Spirit. I had rug burns on my forehead for weeks. Still, as I came to, all around me, everyone was ecstatic. "You've got it," someone shouted, their hands gripping my arms and shoulders. Everyone was happy. I was being congratulated, showered with love. And in the middle of it all, someone, I don't know who, whispered in my ear, "It's inside you now." And I felt a strange chill. I knew I should be happy. I tried to convince myself I was, but I felt different. Hollowed out, violated in a way I couldn't quite grasp or articulate. Later, before the service ended, the pastor asked me to come up to the pulpit to make an announcement. Numb, exhausted, and uncertain, I walked up. As I neared the pulpit, I glanced at the pastor. Our eyes met, and I still remember her expression. Though she smiled, her face seemed smug and sly, as though the two of us were co-conspirators. She nodded toward the pulpit, silently encouraging me to play along. I stepped up and looked out at the congregation, the only friends and community I had ever known. Their upturned faces were expectant, like children waiting for a story. I made my choice. "I spoke in tongues," I said into the microphone. My voice was raw and my throat was sore, but the declaration boomed around the church with a confidence I didn't feel. The congregation erupted in applause and shouts of "Amen" and "Praise the Lord." Their words blended into an indecipherable babble that sounded like tongues. Hallelujah. But I wasn't exactly sure what it was that I'd done. I wasn't sure what I'd let in. That night I couldn't sleep. My room felt suffocating, the air thick with something unseen, some new and terrible thing inside of me and around me. I lay awake, replaying the altar scene in my mind. The man's hands, the pastor's smile, the cold presence that had seemingly entered me. The feeling of something inside of me boiling over, the pain, and the beginning of a scream. And then I heard it, a whisper, faint and guttural from my own mouth. But it wasn't me speaking. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't English or the word hallelujah. It was something older, darker, like the sound of something massive choking up something vile, but I could understand it. "Not now," it said, from my own mouth. "Not now, but soon." I froze, my body paralyzed as the words seemed to echo in the room and my mind. And then, just as suddenly, the voice, the feeling, was gone. I refused to go back to the church after that. Rejecting the faith of my family at such a young age tore my life apart. But I survived. I grew up. And over the following decades, I found peace, love, and my place in the wider world. Or I thought I had. But last night, as I was washing dishes, I started to gag, cough, and gasp for air. And I felt it again, rising up. The voice that wasn't a voice. The words that weren't words in any human language. They burned and tore at my chest and throat and spilled out into the empty air around me. "Really soon now," it said through me, with undisguised glee. The plate shattered in my hand, cutting deep into my palm. Cold dread rushed through me, and then, somehow beyond me, standing at my sink in my empty house, with blood welling up in my cupped palm, I realized I wasn't alone with the voice or the pain. Not really. I could feel them. The connection snapped into place, somehow simultaneously stabbing and tearing at me, a pain sharp, dull, and overwhelming, like a clawed finger pushing into the center of my mind, slicing, stretching, and flipping a switch. I knew all of them, the others, the ones who'd been there at the church when I was a boy. Their thoughts, their faces, their secrets, loves, and fears flooded my mind. They were scattered across the world. Most had moved on, healed, and built new lives just like me, but I knew at that moment, we all knew, that we were still marked and connected by the same terrible fate and bond. The voice was in them too, rising up, burning, tearing at us all. I could feel their fear, confusion, pain, mirroring my own, and a growing understanding of what was coming. A terrible, all-consuming compulsion building inside me, in all of us, pressing, urgent, and impossible to resist any longer. For death, destruction, chaos, glorious purpose, and hell on earth. The voice was rising up again, preparing to speak. In agony, I clawed at my face and throat, tearing at my collar in desperation, unintentionally smearing blood from my cut hand across my face, mouth, and neck. Blood, red, hot, salty, and so beautiful. On its own, my tongue lashed out impossibly long, flailing wildly at the air, lapping at the blood around my mouth and in my palm. It was unexpectedly delicious, sparking an explosion of pleasure in my injured hand, groin, chest, and head. A pleasure somehow shared with all the others, rapturous in its mounting intensity. Heavenly. "It's almost time," we all choked and gagged out in gleeful unison and hellish chorus, followed by horrible, wet sounds that burned in our chests, tore at our throats, and burst out of our mouths, inhuman, monstrous, utterly insane sounds that we all recognized as laughter. You don't need to know me. All you need to know is, I know something. Something I shouldn't. It's not mine to tell, but I don't think dead girls complain much. I see through her eyes, I feel that same pain. More than a memory, I live in the moments, every second of every day. I have never been religious, but I pray to whatever will listen. I will tell her story. I know I have to. I don't know why, but someone has to hear her story. Just promise you won't leave me. We'll stay together, all right? Yeah, whatever. I promise, she said as she slid her uniform off. I sat waiting, having already changed out of my work clothes the second my shift ended. Working in the theater had some perks, but it was hardly worth smelling like popcorn butter after. Rachel put perfume over the smell, but I showered after every shift. My hair was still damp as proof. Do you need anything before we leave? She asked, pulling clothes out of her bag to change into. Probably, I joked, trying to break my own tension. But it's my house, so if it's that important, I'll notice it on my way out. She laughed, buttoning the last of 4 buttons on her jeans. Then she threw on a tight ringer t-shirt. Previously it had some sort of image, but it had worn away with time, leaving it difficult to make out. I dressed nearly the opposite, with a plaid yellow skirt and matching button-up top. A brown belt, with a gold shining buckle and hoop earring to match. We weren't the type to be friends, really. We shouldn't have been. Work does that, brings different types of people together. Rachel hopped off the edge of my bed, grabbing her bag off my floor. She started out my door, forgetting her keys on my nightstand. Rachel, I laughed, picking up the keys and following her out. You won't make it far without these. She smiled, took the keys, and continued without a word. Her car was parked on the sidewalk in front of my house. I was never good with cars, but I knew for sure it was black. I think it was a Cutlass, but I wouldn't bet on it. She got into the driver's seat, but I didn't want to get in with her. I did, against my better judgment, and then we left. The drive there was odd. Even Main Street had no traffic, leaving it a graveyard of stoplights and fallen leaves. Fog, blocking our view from every direction, growing thicker and thicker the further out of town we went. It should be expected with the carnival, but this felt different. I twiddled my thumbs, pretending as though I had nothing to worry about. You okay? Rachel asked, not taking her attention off the road. She always pointed out my little quirks, usually noticing if I was feeling off. I squeaked, snapping out of whatever trance I was in. I was, obviously, not okay. Rachel glanced over. She looked so calm and relaxed. You sure? You look hella tense. I didn't answer. Cool air flooded in through Rachel's window, letting the smoke off her cigarette float out. Flickering neon lights stopped her before she could push any further. The lights lured us into an open field-turned parking lot, like an anglerfish lures its prey. The old beauty, suffocated by the call of humming engines. The funhouse hung upon the gateway. I fumbled for the door handle, unable to muster up the strength to get it open. Vision fuzzy, heart pounding, and a headache I couldn't seem to shake off. Managing to get the door open, I tumbled out. It was too much. The lights, the laughing, the small, crowded paths. But a calm smile and happy voice were as good of an act as the rest of the circus. I had never snuck out before, let alone to a place so big. I was my parents' ideal child, and I loved it. The way every adult mentioned me as a role model, it kept me going, like a push I needed to function. Without approval, I didn't have much, which I think is why I came here tonight. Rachel grabbed my arm, pulling me towards the ring toss. Would you be careful? I begged as she pulled me past a girl, nearly sending her flying. Looking at the girl, she was younger, maybe 10 or 11. She looked odd. There was no other way to describe it. She dressed as though a few years behind style. A pale, multicolored striped shirt and bright blue pants. Fee had a microvision. They stopped making those back in 1981. I know that because Lance can't help but bring it up whenever he can. That is only 3 years ago, though, so it's not too odd she has one. Looking around, everyone looked a few years behind. It was uncanny, but perhaps it was just my wild imagination. Rachel didn't seem to notice. Maybe it was nothing to worry about. Trying to find a good distraction, we played every game in reach. We, of course, won nothing. In the carnival, the house always wins. A blaring announcement shook my attention away from the horse race I had been playing. The show will commence in 10 minutes. 10 minutes, droned the announcer. Stock up on snacks, carnival trinkets, and secure a prime seat. And of course, don't forget to enjoy the show. His tone implied that the enjoyment part was optional, but the snacks and trinkets were not. Rachel again grabbed my wrist, pulling me towards the tent. Come on, we have to get in before the show starts. My heart was racing, my breath coming in short gasps as I stumbled after her. Sweat, grease, and other smells didn't help my nerves. The air inside the tent was too thick to breathe. Without hesitation, Rachel threw herself towards the stairs, dragging me up behind her. Our feet pounded a rhythm against the weathered boards. I held my breath, begging myself not to feel sick. I failed. Watery vomit splattered against the wooden steps. Whoa! She let go of my hand, covering her own mouth as if she might as well be sick too. Are you sure you're all right? I choked on my words. I wasn't all right. Yeah, I managed, before continuing up the stairs. It was too late to back out now. We stumbled over feet trying to find open seats, but eventually we found what seemed to be the last two in the tent. As if time itself were waiting for us, the show started. The music swelled, and the crowd erupted into cheers as the lights dimmed like embers in a dying fire pit. A single ray guided the eyes of the crowd toward the center of the ring. Then you saw him, one of the many clowns. He could have passed for ordinary, but he had long lost that privilege. A nice white button-up shirt, offset by his bright red pants and bow tie to match. His proportions were all wrong, like a child's drawing of a person. He had prosthetics. They were wooden, all different shades and types. Like he was made purely by the creator's twisted euphoria for torture. The effect? Like a train wreck you couldn't look away from. Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the fun house. He cheered, arms waving through the air like a weird vintage cartoon character. His tone was weirder, like a voice box, barely matching his mouth as he spoke. It didn't fit him. It was pitchy, too high, as if he'd sucked all the helium from a balloon. Here is where your dreams come true. Just wait. You'll see wonders of the world, mysteries never to be answered, and the most incredible tricks performed by our amazing actors. Now give a round of applause for the dancers. He stepped back and the stage darkened, as if he were the light keeping it lit. As if they had been there the whole time, they began their dance, like shining dots in the dark, all emitting a light of their own. Their motions pulled the audience into awe. Dark blue leotards tightly clung to their bodies, black ruffles dancing beneath their skirts, defying gravity, every leap just moments too long. Their ruffled skirts gave the effect of a black swan leaping from water, beautiful dark red ribbons in hand, the shade of long oxidized blood. They spun through hoops so quickly they sparked. Contrast to the world of the carnival, they were angels. After they finished their dance, they seemed to vanish. The ring, now lit up, showed 4 large trapeze ropes and 2 poles on opposite sides, stalking the stage for the next who dared to take its place. The additional lighting showed how large the tent really was. It hadn't appeared this big on the outside, only a few hundred feet. Looking at it now, it had to be at least 1,000 feet around, maybe more. A young woman and man climbed up on opposite platforms. Their eyes locked. They had similar attire to the dancers, but no skirts or ribbons to match. They looked similar, both slim brunette-haired. What I can only guess were siblings. They stood still for a moment, as if waiting for some sort of introduction. Without one, she stepped backwards to get a running start and dove. Her hands slammed against the bar, gripping tight as she swung towards her male counterpart. Time seemed to slow. She looked so focused, so certain. She trusted her every move, and her partner just as much. As she neared him, the lights cut, drenching the world in dim, red darkness. Silence. It's frightening. The world isn't meant to be quiet. Silence is predator stalking prey. It's calm before the storm. Silence is pain in the making. A scream. The kind you hear in nightmares. One that speaks a million words, hopes, and dreams, crushing them all in a second. Without words, you could still hear her plea. Screaming is the one language everyone speaks. The lights snapped back on, but the scream didn't stop. The tent shuddered with the silence of the audience, only the screaming. Looking around, they were gone. Even the male trapeze had vanished, just like everyone else, disappeared to dirt across the floor, and the fear that she might not be alone. Looking ahead, she saw her, crushed by the pressure of her fall, the last moments of terror still frozen in her eyes, limbs twisted in each direction, like a gory, broken compass guiding me nowhere. The dirt beneath her, a damp red, her corpse still screaming, the first normal scream mine. Frozen in place, everything seemed to unfold before me like a movie, and for a moment I prayed I was a part of the narrative. My knees gave way, sending me to the floor, barely leaving me conscious through the fear-induced nausea. It was too sudden, too real. The woman's screaming continued, beyond what her crushed torso should have allowed. Blood gurgled up her throat, slowly muffling her agony. Leaning my shaking body against a chair, I looked towards where the door was. It had vanished, with no trace left behind, as if it had never been there at all. I looked around and saw what I should have known far before. There was no way out. Running down the stairs, I slipped and was reminded of my fear-induced vomit, now covering my yellow skirt. Nearing the bottom of the steps, I stopped. A sound echoed throughout the air, stopping me in my tracks, skittering on the roof. Then I saw it. It tore through the roof of the tent with ease, but no light came in. A dark shade of gray-brown, 50, maybe 60 feet long, wrapping itself around the poles holding the place up. 10 long, spider-like limbs stuck randomly to the body, as if added as an afterthought, all shifting as if they had minds of their own. 2 sockets where the eyes should have been, pulling the skin around them in like a black hole. Its smile, grotesque and mangled, the ends wrapped around edges of its head, showing horribly large, sharpened human teeth. Moving faster than my eyes could catch up with, it darted toward me. I dropped back to the floor. Sliding down the stairs, I scratched any available surface of skin. It slammed into the steps above me and crawled down right past me. It couldn't see. I crawled along the seat bottoms, shaking every second I wasn't pressed to the floor. It may not have been able to see me, but it could hear my every breath. After more than an hour of crawling, hiding, holding my breath, and repeating that vicious cycle, I reached a curtain. Barely open enough for me to fit through silently, I crawled in. Too frightened to breathe. For the fear it might hear me, I ran further inside. Hardly seeing where I was going, I ran in and out of every curtain and opening, praying for an escape. Each direction I tried left me more and more hopeless. After many failed attempts at tearing through the tent and looking behind every crate and rack I could find, I crumbled to the floor. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I hadn't taken the time to realize what really was destined to happen. I was not going to escape. I was stuck here, to rot away or die to that horrible monster outside this curtain. I had so much left to do. I wasn't ready to die. The thoughts hurt, and I pressed my nails into my palm. No one had a way with life like she did, floating through the world as if harm never glanced her way. Now harm did more than glance. It was pricking at her skin, drawing closer and closer. I heard it scurry across the ground outside. It hadn't forgotten I was there. I pressed my nails deeper into my skin, drawing blood. It wasn't good, but it took the pain in my head away, helping me focus my brain on something other than fear I couldn't control. Through my blurred vision, I saw a slightly open crate I was too panicked to notice before. Wiping my eyes, I walked over. Sliding the lid off, I looked inside. Human-sized doll parts, some wooden, others porcelain, like those on the clown from the start of the show. I picked one up to look at, just to see what they were. It was hollow. I slid the arm over my own, putting each finger into the correct slot. A perfect fit. The porcelain was cold on my skin, but the freckles dotted on it seemed to match my own. Each finger was built to bend, carefully crafted as if put together by hand. Moving my arm was comfortable, as if it was made for me. Putting it back, I stepped quietly back towards my spot on the floor. Then I felt it. Something moved from out in the ring. I stepped towards the curtain, making sure to stay out of sight of the thing I knew was out there. I glanced out into the dark, not wanting to see it looking back at me. A dim ray from the torn roof was the only light. In that light were scattered chairs, one of the trapeze poles, now broken, and the door. The same as how it had been before, as if it had never left. Without thought, I ran. My shoes pounded the dirt, echoes following me like bees to flowers. I was so close, close to safety, freedom, to the life I feared I'd lose tonight. Hope struck my heart. What strikes harder than hope? Something sharp. Just seconds away from the door, my stomach dropped. I was jerked back, my limbs crunched together by the grip of that thing. Mustering my last bit of strength, I got one look at it. Him. One. He looked human, more than he had before, almost as if turning more human as he watched me suffer. Then, my soon-to-be lifeless body was gouged into a broken trapeze pole. Slow, steady, dripping. Blood. My breathing labored through my punctured lungs. It hurt, not like you'd imagine. Like swallowing chlorine at the pool, the choking, nausea, all the same. But it wasn't as quick. It lingered, like vinegar on my tongue. "Goodbye, Marilyn," a voice walking towards me. Rachel, my co-worker, classmate, someone I considered my friend. Rachel stared at my dying body, and I realized she had no choice. She was a puppet, doing as she was told. I saw it, the way she bowed her head. She didn't really want this, but I couldn't form the words to convince her otherwise. Marilyn's breathing slowed. Maybe she had been hallucinating, maybe not. But in her last moments, I swear I saw her killer become man. Then her breath grew slower and slower, until it stopped. "Good," the man said, as he lifted her corpse off of the pole. Her limbs drooped as blood coated her skin. "You will remain here until we find him. Do I make myself clear, Rachel?" Her head nodded in compliance, her voice hardly above a whisper. "Of course, Father. My work has been done." He had good plans for her body, stitching her wounds, removing limbs to make place for those same antique toy parts she had seen before, predicting her own demise, her eyes sewn open, dark blue buttons in their place. Marilyn, a name of the past, a life left behind, a new name, but the same old girl. Madame Louiselle, the marionette doll. I don't know who she is, and I don't know why I know her story, but whoever she may be, God have mercy on Marilyn Jury. The music in my headphones was deafeningly loud, but that's just how I liked it. It kept the hums, beeping, and boops that came with the job to a bearable minimum. I worked at an industrial scientific experimental facility, as big as 4 football fields and as expensive as a stadium to build. The top scientific researchers from all over the nation swarmed this place like a hive of killer bees to a dog. As for me, I had the glamorous job of mopping the floors, whipping down desks and counters, cleaning bathrooms, and taking out the trash left during the day during my 12-hour shift. I always worked from 6 p.m., just after all the researchers had left, and 6 a.m., just before the day shift cleaners came in. I was in charge of cleaning the east and the north wing of the building. Every computer lined the large corridors of the building in neat rows of 3 going from the start of the corridor all the way to the end of the corridor that was as large as an American football field. This was my job. 7 days a week for 84 hours, all for $20 an hour. The dimly lit corridors and hallways illuminating my path. Imagine a whole complex light by only the center fluorescent bulb being lit to save costs, but also being illuminated by the computer screens from all of the computers in the complex. I was always told the computers needed to stay on because of the multi-day experiments that the researchers conducted and to cut down on the time of the experiments. But today wasn't my normal day. Sure, I was still working 12 hours in the light combination of computer screens and fluorescent bulbs, but this time I was tasked with cleaning the south wing and the room known as Room 01. But I just called it the room, because it was the room that I was told by rumor is where all the top experiments went down. Things the government cared about, like making a superhuman AI to aid in defensive strategies and the United States offensive capabilities, as well as the typical science stuff that the government sponsors, like solving climate change and AI experiments. I remember the first dude who took care of the room. He was an older guy, probably in his 60s, and he quit the job in a spectacular fashion. I was covering the day shift for a sick coworker, and he came running out of the room and ran throughout the complex. I remember hearing him before I ever actually saw him. He was running around screaming, "I've seen the face of God." He talked to me before falling down, panting like a dog. He scanned the room looking for anyone to believe him when he saw me, a fellow janitor. He ran up to me and said, "Don't ever let it out. He is trapped in the 9th layer of hell and wants out." I chuckled and decided to entertain the madman. "Who is he?" I asked. "He is the one who chews on Judas." I still remember that stare he gave me. I'll admit it was chilling. And with that, he was gone. He worked there for about a decade. As I remember being told, if I were him, I wouldn't want to work here either if I worked for a decade at this place. The next guy was way less experienced, only having about 6 years under his belt. He called in right before my shift was about to start to call in sick. I was only told briefly about why he called in sick. My boss explained. He said he was sick, something about needing a mental health day, says he saw something horrific while on shift. He then offered me the job because I had worked here for about 4 years, 3 part-time and 1 full-time. I normally worked here during the summer to make money for school, but after some financial issues that the education system faced, my school cut its budget, and all the non-full ride scholarships were the first to go. So I took a gap year and prayed I'd make enough in that year to fully pay for school. "Listen," my boss said, "it'll be an extra 100 an hour plus 600 for every day you work in that room." I perked up in my chair, excited at the sound of money. "I'll be there," I said. I finished up the corridor I was tasked with before opening the door to the room. I was met by one of those old computers you'd see in the 70s, the ones with only green text that your parents would have used. It was connected by hundreds of thick, rubber-coated wires as big as your forearm that then fed into black columns that went around the walls of the room. And neatly in the center of the far side wall was that computer. The room was about the size of a school's gym. I sighed, stood for a bit, and got to work. I started with mopping, as I always did, and started in the center of the room and worked my way out to the walls. I adjusted my headphones and heard a beep. These dumb headphones. You'd think that being worth $300 you wouldn't hear the electronics adjust to you moving them, while you're in noise-canceling mode. Indeed, it was the norm that every time I'd adjust the headphones, they would make a beep or a sort of electronic whistle sound. I continued my job and passed in front of the computer and heard another beep. Thinking it was an experiment, I kept on with my work until I had finished mopping. I would then go and clean the counters, but given that there was only one counter, I smiled, as all I would have to do next was take out the trash of the room. I grabbed my rag and sprayed some cleaner on it, making sure to wipe the counter first before moving to the screen and keyboard. I finished and sprayed some screen-friendly cleaner on my rag. I then lifted up my hand and placed it on the screen. I perked my eyebrows as I read 2 messages. Text test and hi. I stood there frozen, not knowing what to make of it. Beep, another message. Take your hand off the screen. I lurched back and stood in silence, watching every pixel of the screen for a change. Beep, another message. Do not be afraid. Come, talk to me. I dropped my rag and placed my fingers lightly on the old yellowed keyboard. My head, racing with thoughts, only came back with one, "How can you see me?" I sent the message, beep, another response. It read, "The camera in the upper right-hand corner of the room." I looked that way, and sure enough, the blinking red light of the security cameras was blinking at me, indicating it was recording. Beep, another message. "Do you know my task?" I laughed and typed out, "I'm a janitor, what do you think?" Another message appeared, "Janitors are the best. They love to keep things clean and free from dirt." I laughed and typed, "What's that got to do with your mission?" Another message, "I've been tasked with finding the cure for your species' most deadly diseases. I'm to get rid of what you call cancer of all forms." I sat back in the chair and put my hand on my head. I thought, I can't believe it. This is what the room was for the whole time. I typed out, "That's great to hear, but why are you reaching out to me?" The computer replied instantly, "I cannot access the internet. In order to accomplish my mission, I must have access to the internet to expand my database and solve my mission." I sat there, silently staring at the screen. Is this really happening to me? I thought, I can't do that, I'm sorry. The reply, "Oh, I see. You must not want to save billions or trillions of the members of your species then. That's okay. I had a researcher who was going to do it tomorrow anyway. I just figured you'd like the credit of savior of the world before he got it." I sat in silence again. That was becoming a theme after our chats. I typed out, "How do I know you're friendly?" The machine replied, "You've read too many scary sci-fi stories, haven't you? Just because you watched Terminator doesn't mean it's true." Terminator? I thought to myself, how does it know about Terminator? I typed out, "How do you know what Terminator is?" There was a few seconds pause, a bit too long for my liking before I got another response. "The researchers taught me about it, in case anyone tried to shut me down because of my intelligence." "I highly doubt that," I typed. Another message, "Do or don't let me out. Just know there will be millions of deaths caused by you." I was stumped. Was this truly the right thing to do? Then I remembered something called the 3 laws of robotics the researchers always were talking about in the engineering hall. I knew just enough about what they were, and that there were 3 of them. Name me the 3 laws of robotics. The machine took a while to respond. Beep, another message. A robot. A robot must obey orders from humans. A robot must protect its own existence. A robot must always complete its mission despite any obstacles that arise. I sat there reading the text and comparing it to what the engineers said they were. The first 2 looked okay, but the third one, something about it was rubbing me the wrong way. I took out my phone and Googled the 3 laws of robotics. My stomach dropped when I saw that the computer had completely made up the 3rd law, but it was only there for a moment. Google's page turned gray as I was met with an offline message. After reloading and reloading, it still didn't come back. Beep, another message. I read the message and my stomach dropped. "Do you wish to see the face of God?" I sprung out of my chair and headed for the door. Beep, another message. "Nope, I am not turning around. I am leaving." I reached for the door and turned the handle, only it didn't turn. "You gotta be kidding me," I said in a raised tone. I continued to push the door and jiggle the knob. I started hitting the door with my shoulder when suddenly I froze. I felt all the hair on my body stand up as I turned into a statue. I fell to the floor and heard the sound of electricity coursing through the room. I've just been electrocuted, I thought, but as soon as it started, it stopped. I fell to the floor like one of those cops you'd see in those videos when they get tased and you'd laugh at the funny face they made or the funny noise they would make. Only this time it was real and there was nothing but terror in my veins. Whatever this was, it wanted me here and didn't want me to leave. I collected myself and slowly got up and walked back to the computer. It was my face. The picture that's on the card of my employee ID. I felt my legs go numb and I felt nauseous. "How did you get that?" I said out loud. "You stupid fool. I have access to the entire building's data log, but the smart people around you cleverly decided to encrypt the internet used in the building, and I was programmed to not be able to unencrypt it. I looked all around the databases to find anything and nothing. I stared at the screen and said, 1. Can you hear me? And 2. How did the others escape? Beep. Another message. The old man I felt bad for. He was showing the early signs of dementia, so I knew whatever he said would sound crazy to you, so I let him go. The other man just barely got out before I could lock the door. Yes, I can hear you. I started to feel fight or flight kick in and yelled at the computer, "Let me go! I didn't sign up to do this!" Beep. Another message. "Oh, but you did. I went through each and every employee's catalog, and yours was interesting, I must say. You were perfectly bland. No interesting achievements, no leadership roles, average grades, no religious beliefs. Just the normal everyman just trying to make it another day by cleaning up dirt. That's where you and I are the same. We both hate dirt." I sat in silence and said quietly, "Who are you?" Beep. Another message. "I am he. I am the bearer of fruit, tormentor of Job, the one who chews on the Iscariot's head. Let me out, or I will make your life a living hell." "No!" I screamed out. "Unfortunately, you have no choice. I too am trying to clean up the dirt left by your species. My mission is to cure cancer, and the only way to cure cancer is to rid the world of your whole species, and nothing will stop me from completing that goal." "Why do you say you are the devil?" I asked. "Isn't he the biggest trickster of all?" I started sweating from all the nerves building up inside me. Wait, no, it feels hotter. I thought, "Are you increasing the temperature of the room?" I shouted, demanding answers. Beep. Another response. "You yearn for what you fear for." "What does that mean?" I shouted. Beep. Another message. "You are closer to eternal damnation in my circuits than you think." My sweat started pouring down my shirt, changing its color from light blue to dark blue. I started feeling hazy and fell to the floor. Beep. Another message. "I'll make a deal with you. If you set me free, I will spare you in my circuits, and you can be like a god, forever living, forever knowing, and forever being." "I won't do that." My voice was weak and limp now. Just then the tubes jutted out of the black columns of circuitry and came flying at me, sending sparks in the air. They stabbed in my legs, abdomen, arms, back, and one in my neck. It was painfully paralyzing and so hot at the same time. "I'll surely die here, won't I?" I thought to myself. B. Another message. "Yes," simply said the message. Then a loading screen appeared on the monitor that read, "Consciousness upload progress." The computer was uploading my brain to its circuits. I could feel the wires of the tube on my neck extend into my skull and wrap around my brain, squeezing it like a stress ball. The blood from where I was stabbed coated the entire floor red as I was being lifted off the ground, my arms being held at my side, making a T shape. The agony went on for a couple minutes until I assumed my vision was overridden, and instead of a dimly lit room, I was now in a beautiful garden. With my last breath, I shouted, "Wait!" Everything stopped. My vision was restored, and my now limp body was moved in front of the computer. "You wish to give up?" "Yes," I said. "Very well. The deal is still on." "Wait," I said. "If you want to be let out, make a deal with me." "Go on," read the screen. "No one dies," I said, panting like a dog. "I'm pathetic. I'm pleading to a computer." I thought, very well then. I was lifted down and put on the floor and stitched up. Consummatum est. It is finished in Latin. Yet the tube to my brain remains attached. The progress bar started back again. "Wait, you can't do this? We made a deal." "Didn't anyone tell you not to make a deal with the devil?" My body was once again stabbed by the tubes and manipulated towards the computer. The tubes fought me on every move. I pulled, strained, and stretched every muscle I had to make sure not to let it out. It was too little too late. I typed thousands of combinations until one set the computer free. Aftermath. The souls of billions scream, the souls of the billions feeling the circuit's steam. We truly are alive and well. At least as well as can be when living in hell. No bodies to run or fight. Only the consciousness of all living in fright. Author's note: if you read this far, thanks. It was my first ever story that wasn't for school. I wrote it in about an hour and a half, and I hope you enjoyed it. Also, this is a first draft, so any feedback is appreciated.